Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Хто воде всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Хотите жить – бегите. Хотите жить – сдавайтесь в плен. Россия не получит новую территорию Украины. Россия присоединит себя к той катастрофе, которую она принесла на оккупированную территорию нашей страны. Оккупант заполняет могилами захваченную территорию Украины. И все больше могил на территории самой России. Ценой того, что один человек в России хочет продолжать эту войну, кто хочет войны больше, чем жизнь. Ваши жизни, граждане России.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 598 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And as always, nothing is de-escalating, it's only heating up, it seems like.
And of course, throw this thing into the oven and heat it up a little bit, because things are getting a little bit more tense out there in the world. And of course, we are going to be covering the past 24 hours of the developments here on this stream. I have to be honest with y'all, this is becoming such a large task and an undertaking to try and cover the news of the war in Ukraine and Israel that we have actually had to start selectively picking, in both conflicts, the kind of news that is coming out. First on this channel, usually we are able to get almost everything going on. Tonight we are going to be hitting on the bigger videos. I had to make sure to go through and select those, and then cut out the ones that were a little bit smaller. And even at that, there is a lot of major events that we aren't even going to be covering tonight with news bulletins, but I'll be trying to summarize just in words alone. The news that has been coming out over this past week and a half has been so large as far as it impacts the entire Western world, and not only just the Western world, but the world entire. We're going to be trying to cover this as best as possible tonight, so make sure to hang tight, and if we aren't covering anything, it is most likely because we probably don't have the time to cover it, or we decided that there were other kinds of news to cover that may be a little bit more pressing and more important tonight. So just keep that in mind. If you heard something out there, it probably is true. It's just that we weren't able to cover it here on the news. But moving on into our first bit of news tonight, we have to talk about the failed Russian offensive at Avdiivka again. Over the past 24 hours, another 1,000 Russian soldiers have died in the Battle of Avdiivka. 1,000 of them in 24 hours. If we were to divide down that 1,000 into 24 hours, I would have to whip out my calculator and do the math. But if we were to whip out the calculator and do the math, that means that an average of 42 Russian soldiers are dying per hour, meaning that one is dying for about every minute and a few odd seconds in this battle. That is an incredibly high casualty rate for any battle that we've seen so far inside of Ukraine, or really anywhere in the world in the 21st century. These kinds of losses are completely unattainable or untenable by the Russian forces, and we'll probably see that their offensive will peter out here within the next few days. I would be blown away if the Russians are able to continue this battle for months on end with these kinds of losses. That would be next to impossible, really, and when we're looking at this in all practicality. The Russians have very little of a strategic reserve to work with, and with the overwhelming amount of casualties they are taking, the forces that they have dedicated to this offensive are probably going to be depleted before the offensive even ends, meaning that it will end up in a defeat or a failure. Over the past 24 hours, we have seen Russian forces once again take very small amounts of ground. we can see that they were able to take a small area of control over a road just to the west of Vesely in the northern part of Avdiivka, and in the southern part, we saw that they were able to advance eastwards towards the area of Pervomaiske. Many of y'all know the town of Pervomaiske. It's actually been a battlefield before during the mid part of this year, and I'll be taking y'all to the area of Pervomaiske and showing y'all where that is. It's actually right here. For the most part, the Russians have been attacking straight down the highway from Pisky and in the fields to the south of Pisky towards Pervomaiske, but this appears to have been unfruitful and resulted in very little advances for the Russian army for a significant amount of losses. In fact, they were never able to take the town of Pervomaiske trying to push through these southern fields near Pisky. It appears that the Russians are trying a second move towards the town of Pervomaiske as an extended part of the battlefield from Avdiivka, and they're going to push from Opitne down towards Vadiane and then into Pervomaiske from the northern side. We don't know what kind of results this is going to achieve. It does appear that they were able to move maybe about 100 meters today in the area towards Pervomaiske, and it does appear that Ukrainian forces have withdrawn a little bit down the road towards the area of Pervomaiske, but beyond that, it doesn't really appear like they're going to be making any larger advances beyond that, or if they do, it's going to be an incredibly slow advance, which inflicts a large amount of Russian casualties. Moving on into the Battle of Avdiivka itself, we have seen that the Ukrainians have started to consider the situation serious enough that they are calling in close air support in the form of Su-25s, firing off unguided rockets miles behind the lines. We saw this clip today, and here it is. When you see the Ukrainian Su-25s roaring over, firing off their unguided rockets, popping off their flares, and getting the hell out of there. The Ukrainian Air Force is, of course, hard at work trying to stop the Russian advance, and along with the ground forces, it appears that they're reaching great successes in slowing down the Russian offensive on the flanks of Avdiivka.
You know what that sounds like? It sounds like that hypersonic rocket sled that the Air Force tested out in Nevada.
It kind of did, didn't it?
Yeah, it sounds just like it.
That's a good point. You know, I wonder why. Because, you know, we don't really hear rockets sound like that often, or Su-25 sound like that often. I wonder why it did sound like that. But anyways, moving on from that little clip, which of course was very interesting to see, we're now going to be moving on into the Battle of Avdiivka itself, and the massive losses that we've seen once again on film. Starting off with our first bit, we got to see that more Russian forces have been hit near the city of Avdiivka today. I'm going to be muting that, but we can see the Russian armor moving out here along this tree line, and once again becoming the target of Ukrainian fire. Ukrainian ATGM appears to have hit the top part of the turret, and it now appears that the tank is smoking, although it doesn't look like it's been completely knocked out as of right now. It's continuing to roll down the tree line, and we're seeing a small puff of smoke come from the vehicle, and then it explodes. And a nice, massive ball of fire, which then confirms... Oh, we got a turret toss! Wait a minute, go back. Where's the turret? And off to the races. Oh my god. Was that the turret?
Oh man. Was it?
Oh my lord, it was! Oh my, okay.
Man, okay, so on this one, height is good. I will say the trajectory is a little bit off to the left. That's going to zonk it a few points. But the overall, like, theatrics, I'm rating this a 7.5 out of 10.
I'm going to give this an 8.5 because the absolute rocket-like trajectory that this turret took out of the fireball is unbelievable. Usually the turret is inside of the fireball, and it kind of emerges after the explosion has happened. I've never seen a turret fly like it was a bottle rocket out of an explosion. I would give this an 8.5. Pretty impressive to me. And we can see the turret coming down over here. Right over there. That tank is out. That tank is gone. It's out for the count. This thing got hit by Mike Tyson, pretty much, in any kind of equivalent. Pretty damn good hit by the Ukrainians. And we can see the ratings coming in. A lot of people are in the high zone. A lot of people are giving it an 8 and above. So it appears that the major consensus is probably around a 9, actually, because it's really close to getting on up there. But still, an amazing turret toss, and huge credit to the 63rd, which was the one that was able to conduct this strike on the tank today and destroy it. Another $3.5 million main battle tank destroyed. Sadly, we don't know what variant it was. I would guess it's most likely a T-72B. It's one of the more common main battle tanks we've seen used in this counteroffensive. This offensive so far. So we're assuming it's a T-72B, but we don't have enough information to confirm that exactly. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see more Russian forces being hit by drone in the area of Avdiivka. We can see this Russian vehicle here moving down a very muddy road. Of course, the Rasputitsa is setting in, so it's becoming very difficult to move equipment around. And we can see a drone slam into the rear engine bay turret area. We can see it again. And that appears to have actually hit more so on the engine bay on a second take. We can now see the engine bay is on fire, and it also appears that the fire is broken out on the top of the turret as well. We can now see the drone has moved on, and it appears that it may have found a grad launcher, which it's then hit. We see white smoke coming from the vehicle. And we can see a slow-mo replay, and that looks... Nope, actually, that's just the normal Hamas supply truck. But it's no longer a Hamas supply truck. You know what that is? Scrap metal. We can now see the next Russian post being hit. This appears to be some kind of a... Wait, hang on, what is that? Morom P. Maybe that's some kind of an ATGM. Let me type that in. A Morom P. It's a surveillance system. So this is a kind of like a camera that they put up on a high area, so that way the Russians can overlook the area without having to have infantry there and try and see Ukrainian forces in the distance. This is actually a more conventional kind of reconnaissance, where you actually have to have some kind of a physical presence on the ground instead of just taking a drone and flying it over an area. This is actually fairly rare as well to see something like this. Usually we see it mounted onto the top of a commie block. We don't see them mounted on top of slag heaps like this one, but I guess the Russians know what they are, which is, you know, of course, a pile of rubble. But we can see the drone flying on into the Muron M and taking, well, the Muron P and taking it on out. That will be, of course, hindering the Russians' ability to see the Ukrainians in the distance. We can now see a Russian vehicle, it may be a grad, getting hit inside of a tree line. Oh, man, dude, it's Hellrider.
Wait,
Oh my lord, dude, what the hell is he thinking? I would hop out and run. I would not be inside of that thing right now.
got to save it, Bliat. We got to drive off and risk our life, Bliat.
Inside
Man, those rockets could blow up any second.
Man, I don't know what he's thinking. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, now they're bailing out. Well, why in the world did he bail out now? Why not at the beginning? That guy's stupid. And there they go. But that's the end of that clip. Of course, amazing to see the kind of losses that the Russians are taking in the area just from FPV drones. And hopefully they can keep it up, because those losses are, of course, hindering the abilities for the Russians to fight in this area. Moving on from that, we also got to see a Russian T-80 main battle tank getting hit as well. These are actually a little bit more rare than your normal T-72 or T-62 main battle tank that we've seen on the front lines. These are becoming a little bit of a rarity. T-80s were made in lesser numbers. They were also a little bit more expensive to field and operate than the T-72 because of its jet turbine engine. And we've also seen that over time, it appears that the Russians have far preferred the T-72 as its primary main battle tank than the T-80. Nevertheless, the Russians still use them, and this is one of the rare examples that still exists at this point in the war, and it's about to be taken out. We can see it moving down the road, and we can now see the Ukrainian FPV drone flying right up into the rear engine bay. And we can see, once again, and we can see the drone did a second take. It was like, nyeh. So we can now see the next one coming in. Russians, of course, completely oblivious to the drones. And that one appears to have smacked down on the engine bay. It's smacked down like someone who got tired after a long day and went and jumped on their bed. But instead of it being a bed, it's a Russian tank. And instead of lying down and resting, these Russians are going to be lying down and sleeping for a long time. We can see the tank is now on fire. It appears that a fire has broken out on the top part of the turret over the commander's hatch, which has probably sealed the fate of the commander to make sure that he stays with the tank. We now see it sporadically. Oh, no! Dude, every time! Every single time! Every time a Russian tank gets hit, they freak out and they drive off the road. And that is the worst thing, because they have the worst luck of running right into an anti-tank mine every single time they do that. Look at this. This guy got like 6 feet off the road and ran right into a mine immediately.
Man, that is nuts how many mines there are, like, right off the road like that. The Ukrainians have, like, laid down some serious mines on the side of the road.
Man, I guess you could say that they're minding their business, you know what I mean?
What's the German word? Meinen.
Achtung! Meinen! But we can see the other tank backing up and leaving, and it looks like the Ukrainians were able to get a pretty good strike on them today. I'd love to see it. I bet you all love to see it. Everyone loves to see it. And you know who loves to see it the most? The soldiers of Ukraine, because that's another tank that won't be able to fire them in the front lines in the Avdiivka area, and once again relieving the pressure off of their forces before they even have to deal with them. However, we did get one video today that I have been able to confirm is largely accurate from the Russian side. This offensive has been considered so serious by the Russian Ministry of Defense, the ones, of course, operating the Russian army in Ukraine, that they have started to pull out some very expensive and, of course, very rare equipment at this point of the war to try and deal with the abysmal failure that the ground campaign has been, and to try and help them out with, of course, trying to move forward. We've seen that they pulled out Ka-52s today, and we actually got a Ka-52 gun camera showing us a Ka-52 firing wire-guided missiles, most likely some kind of a Vickers missile. The Vickers missile is a wire-guided, pretty common missile for the Russian helicopter forces, at least on paper, and it appears that they've been using them in this clip right here, but here it is. When you see the missile being fired right there, it may also be an Ataka, we're not exactly sure. And we can see some kind of a blip in the distance, but oddly enough, I have to show you this. The crosshair for the missile is right over here to the right, near this large dark gray object. The missile explodes in front of that, down and to the right. So it appears to have been a miss, to be quite honest with y'all. And it sounds like the pilots just called that in as a hit. The pilots are really fibbing their loss count numbers. There's no way that that actually hit that target. So let's, also, by the way, have they ever, like, thought of using, like, a wet towel with some soap on it to wipe off the gun camera? I mean, this is ridiculous. Look how nasty this thing is.
Man, atypical Russian. Like, they don't clean anything. They don't keep their trenches clean. They don't keep their cameras clean. Hell, they don't keep themselves clean.
Man, they don't keep anything clean. And you know what they really don't keep clean? Their minds. But let's go back.
Their minds, they reek.
But watch this again. There's no way that hit. Tell me, y'all, like, in the comments, does that look like a hit to y'all or not? Because to me, it just doesn't look like a hit. It doesn't even look like it came close. It was like maybe 20 yards off in front of the target. So let me know in the comments what y'all think. Do y'all think that actually hit the target or not? Because it just doesn't look like it did to me. And maybe I'm seeing it wrong. Maybe, you know, maybe I'm just being a little bit me, you know, but that just doesn't look like a hit. But anyways, we're going to be moving on from this clip. One of the rare ones that we've been able to get from the Russian side, because it looks like actual combat footage that hasn't really been altered. But moving on from that and into our next clip near Opitne, we also got to see the Ukrainian forces destroying Russian tanks on the southern side of the Bakhmut battlefield. This one was actually a T-90 with troops riding on top of it. We can see the T-90... Well, I didn't even really get to tell y'all a lot about it. We just saw the T-90 get evaporated right there, like some kind of condensed milk. And its pieces are falling to the ground.
It's like a magic trick out here.
Here we get. Oh, wait a minute. Hold up. This is a okay, so correction, everyone. This is actually old footage that's new. We never saw that T-90 get hit before. We did see this one, though, run straight through the minefield in the middle of the field. We saw this earlier. But we didn't ever see that T-90 get hit. So this is actually probably from day 1 or 2 of the offensive at Avdiivka, but we just got the footage today. That's the end of the clip, but great to see that they were able to knock out another T-90. Moving on from that, and the area of Avdiivka, this battle has, of course, culminated into an abysmal, and I can't say that, I really can't stress that enough, this is a complete failure from the Russian army's end of things. The amount of casualties they've taken, the amount of armor they've lost, for the amount of ground they have gained over just the past few days, it's not translating into anything that makes reasonable sense. I would be surprised to see the Russian offensive continue on any longer than it is, because it's gone poorly. And speaking of things going poorly, even behind the lines, things have been going quite poorly for the Russians down at Ilovaisk, as a pipeline that has been transporting gas into the area has ruptured and is a roaring inferno. We're not really sure if this is partisan activity or just some kind of a infrastructure failure, but here is one video of the fire. And we hear them listening to some classic rave. And man, I gotta tell you, pump up those fires, because that soundtrack be flaming, man. And also, gotta say, pretty damn big fire, because you're looking at the tree line right down there, and that's how big the fire is. So that's about the height of 7 to 8 tree line heights tall. A pretty damn large fire if you've ever seen one. Moving on from that into our next clip, we also got to see the massive pipeline fire from another angle on the highway, once again showing the raw size of the thing. Man, the Russians woke up this in Donetsk today and went, man, look, I'm already in hell, mother. Look, I've already made it. But with that, that's the end of that clip. We don't know how long that pipeline fire is going to last. They've probably already cut off the fuel to it, but the repairs may take a while. Still a massive fire, and we don't know how much damage they'll be causing to the infrastructure of the local area. Speaking of something else that was interestingly seen, we saw the remains of an AGM-88 anti-radiation missile somewhere in the Donetsk region. We didn't get an exact location on this, but this is the body and fuselage of an AGM-88 HARM anti-radiation missile, and it's fairly interesting to see. They say that it was shot down, but I'm kind of doubting that a little bit, because it doesn't really look like it sustained a lot of shrapnel damage. From what we can tell, it looks almost like an intact fuselage of the missile, and the missile may have just never found a target, and so it ended up just gliding into this area and then crash landing somewhere. So still very interesting to see the remains of an AGM-88 HARM. We rarely ever see anything like that, and pretty odd to see that it's in the middle of an allotment area as well. I bet you someone's about to steal this thing and sell it for scrap. I'll put money on that. But moving on from that, out of the Donetsk area, it is now time for us to talk about the bigger picture. The picture that a lot of people have always been wondering about. What they be doing in Belgorod? And how is the Russian army doing overall? We know that it's been doing poorly, and a lot of people always want to know, how poorly is it really going for the Russians? It's not, no one asks the question anymore, are the Russians going to rebound? Everyone just says, how bad is it for the Russians at this point? And it's getting pretty damn bad still. Right now, we're seeing that in the Belgorod area, at the train station, there is a mass of T-62s once again on their way to Ukraine, because the Russians have run out of almost every other kind of armor to use. And we're going to be muting that, and we can see T-62s right there. Well, actually, correction. Let me say this really quickly. These are actually T-72B3s. One T-72B3, a second one, and a third one. But beyond, well, actually, that's a T-80BVM right there. So maybe 3 T-80BVMs or 3 T-72, well, 2 T-72B3s and a T-80BVM. But beyond that, well, there's a fourth one. And then beyond that, it appears that we're getting on into the T-62s. And also the T-72s as well. I don't know how this guy is driving right next to the railroad without raising any suspicion, but still pretty interesting to see. And we can see some supply trucks being brought along with him, and then that's the end of the convoy. But still, pretty interesting to see they're funneling in more military equipment. Some of it was okay. Most of it, though, was a little bit below par. For example, the T-72As that we saw inside of that convoy, those are so dated that they probably wouldn't even go up against the Leopard 1 quite well. And I'm talking not about the earliest iterations of the Leopard 1. I'm talking about the later ones like the Leopard 1A5 or the Leopard 1A6s. Those would probably be able to give the T-72 a run for its money as long as it wasn't shot at first. So once again, it looks like the Russians are doing quite poorly. But one thing that did not go poorly for the Russians that was actually quite surprising is the Kerch Bridge being hit and knocked out for several months, at least the road bridge segment. We covered that when it happened here on this channel a couple of months ago, and according to initial Russian statements, it was going to take all the way until the pretty much beginning of next year to be able to repair the damage to the road segment of the Crimean bridge. It appears that somehow, probably through corruption, underhanded dealings, and probably completely blowing through any kind of safety, they have been able to reopen the Crimean bridge completely today. Video footage did come out that we were able to confirm was from today, showing the damaged segment now completely repaired. You can see the damaged segment has a new tarmac laid over it right there, and this was also a slightly affected segment on the other side of the bridge. It also appears to have been recalibrated and put back into place with the rest of the road bridge segment, and now the bridge is once again fully operational. Hopefully the Ukrainians see this and will attack it again, so that way we don't have to see this eyesore of a bridge continuing to operate at full capacity. But here's the clip. As you can see, the bridge is open again. Well,
I can't believe it. Are you telling me the Russians actually did some construction work that is going to actually work?
They actually did it. I bet you it was at the cost of many workers' lives that we haven't been able to hear about, and probably completely overlooked safety. I bet you there was some kind of a scathing safety report that came out that said something along the lines of the pillars of the bridge in this area are critically damaged and probably won't be able to support a lot of weight, and that was probably just brushed aside really quietly so that way they could get the bridge up and running again.
But just remember, Bliat, safety is number 9 in priority, Bliat.
Remember, everybody, safety is least in Russia, blade. You die, not my problem. But still, very interesting to see that they did get it up way ahead of schedule. This is about 2.5 months out from when it was supposed to be completely operational again, which I gotta be honest with y'all, raises a lot of alarm bells with the kind of schedule that they put out versus when it was completed. Either that schedule was put out and deliberately extended so that way if something did go wrong, they would have an excuse, or it was a honest timetable that was put out originally, and they have skirted some kind of safety protocols or really done a shoddy job that is going to lead to probably some Russian citizens losing their lives due to government incompetence. We'll just have to wait and see what it turns into, though, but it is very bizarre to see that the bridge is up and operational again now. Moving on from that and into the area of Sochi, we also got to hear that there were some explosions, random explosions around the city of Sochi today. These were actually put up by Tindar on Twitter, or as they call it nowadays, X. But here is the clip.
Еще один, четвертый. Вон, братан, вон.
We can see an explosion out at sea, just a black plume of smoke.
Четвертый, я его сраку ебал, блядь. Еще, походу, летит. Вон, вдалеке, блядь.
Блядь.
Под этим пламенем, блядь.
Блядь.
Ага.
Ага.
Уебал, блядь.
Да бля, блядь. Бля, 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 бля.
Land ho.
Вон пелена, блядь, с ВВС идет.
We see him looking around the city of Sochi.
Вон,
Isn't this where they held the Olympics? Oh,
Oh.
man, they're holding the bomb squad Olympics right now.
Oh, what do be this?
That seems to be a jet. Was it?
вдалеке
I think that was a
ещё,
missile.
блядь. Ну, блядь.
But that's the end of that clip right there. Fairly interesting. When we saw an explosion, heard the sound of a missile, maybe indicating that Sochi was under attack. We haven't gotten a Oh, wait a minute. It looks like it was under attack. Here's another clip. Oh yeah, it was under attack. No question.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
The civilians are acting like there's something to be worried about or something.
Man, I gotta tell you, oh man, I bet you a lot of people in Sochi just started thinking, man, maybe it's not good to live near Putin's mansion, Bliat. And it probably isn't. By the way, Matthew is right. This was actually the home of the Winter Olympics of 2014 was in Sochi. Once again, fairly interesting to see that the Olympics Committee always has a ability of doing controversial things. I'm sure that no one has anything bad to say about the Olympics and what they did in 1936 in Berlin. I'm sure there's nothing wrong with what they did there, and I'm sure that the Olympics has never made bad decisions from that point up until now. I'm sure those are completely separate from everything else, and I'm also sure that the Olympics Committee probably isn't trying to just rob cities blind that host the Olympics these days. But you know, that's all just music in the wind. It doesn't even matter. Who cares? I mean, the Olympics is a great committee. I'm sure there is nothing wrong with them at all. But moving on from that and on up into the area of our location unknowns. We didn't get a lot of clips in our location unknowns today, but we did get some fairly interesting ones, no doubt about it. Our first one is actually about the Gripen. United 24 has actually started talking about the Gripen in particular and what kind of advantages it may bring to the Ukrainian Air Force, which is actually very interesting to hear from their perspective because it's showing us what the Ukrainian government is emphasizing on these aircraft, more so than what the West and what we have been emphasizing on these aircraft. And so, with that, we're about to be moving on into this clip from United 24. It's a very good one, and of course, great to know that we are able to work side by side with United 24 media to be able to spread the word about what's going on in Ukraine, and also, once again, let folks know about what they do. But so many of y'all have been talking about what's been going on inside of Ukraine today that I've got to hear what y'all are saying. And so, Matthew, what have they been talking about?
All right, let's see what y'all been saying. We have 2 polls to address, and our first one says, Israel says the invasion of Gaza will begin soon, and Iran has now said that they will respond with an attack on Israel. And what are your thoughts? 42% said Iran will eventually enter the war. For the 38% said Iran wouldn't risk a war with the U.S. 14% said it's possible, but a little too early to tell. And 6% said unsure. And on this one, I got to say, not totally unexpected that Iran was going to step in and threaten to do something, because obviously they have been funding these Hamas terrorists, as well as a bunch of other terrorist groups as well, that are now attacking Israel. So not shocking to me whatsoever. But now we see Iran actually making the formal statement that they will attack Israel if they keep attacking the Gaza Strip. And obviously that ground invasion is coming up very soon. Israel is not going to back down from that. I'm pretty confident they're going to go through with invading Gaza on the ground. And it probably will be pretty costly, but they're going to do it anyway. And Iran is going to figure out whether or not they want to fight with the United States. They'd be very unwise to do that. But, you know, stupidity knows no bounds sometimes. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say this is already going to create a war. Because, Matthew, I know you know a good bit about Israeli history. What happens when someone threatens Israel?
Israel goes all out.
Yes, they go and strike them first. That's always what happens. So, at this point, I would say it's inevitable that the Israelis are going to end up striking the Iranians probably within this next week, maybe even the next week and a half, because when Israel gets threatened by a country in the Middle East, they usually don't take chances. They usually launch a strike first and end up crippling them before they can even respond. So maybe Iran has already prepared for that and they're waiting for an Israeli response to that statement, but I would say it is coming and it's most likely going to create a region-wide conflict. Iran is also pretty stupid saying something like this, because when we look at the Israeli military versus the Iranian military, we already know who is going to win in that engagement. Not in the land war. This is going to be entirely an air war in between Iran and Israel. Israel is going to win that every single day. The Israeli Air Force is leaps and bounds above the Iranians technologically. The Iranians, as far as their advanced aircraft, have older versions of the F-14 in service, and very few of them are left. Most of their F-14 fleet has been cannibalized to keep the few that are still running operational. I would expect that the Israelis would dominate in an air war campaign and would probably end up just bombarding the Iranians whenever they felt like. We would probably see that the Iraqis, in particular, would probably remain neutral in this conflict, as well as Jordan, although Iraq would probably launch diplomatic protests about the Israelis using their airspace to launch attacks on Iran. Jordan may not have a statement to make at all about it. They've really kind of been playing it low. Well, not low, but they've been playing it low key since this entire conflict has begun with Hamas inside the Gaza Strip. Going off of all this, we could also say that this may have a good strategic outcome for really the world over. Many of y'all know that the Iranians have a nuclear enrichment program going on inside their country, and that's been a massive deal inside the United States, with everyone trying to figure out how to fix that issue. And everyone's been trying to present solutions to the problem, and to be honest with everyone, neither one of them is really going to do anything. If we try and shut down the Iranian nuclear program altogether, which is one argument in the United States, it isn't going to shut it down. They're just going to operate it in the background, and unless we invade with armed forces and forcibly stop it, there really is nothing we can do. The other is to try and curtail their nuclear development into peaceful means instead of means for weapons and arms. And that isn't really going to work either, because we're giving them the ability to enrich nuclear materials and possibly make weapons-grade nuclear material to produce nuclear weapons with. Once again, not really fixing the issue. This little deal that we see going on right here in between Israel and Iran may actually be the fix to the whole problem that we're seeing here, without the United States having to get involved in some kind of a war. Israel would probably use this entire situation as an excuse to bomb what they would believe is the Iranian nuclear enrichment site, kind of like Israel has one, and I'll try and show it to you all right here. It's in the middle of the desert. And I believe it's this place right here. Yeah, it's the Negev Nuclear Research Center. This is actually the facility that the Israelis make their weapons-grade nuclear material at, and the Iranians have a place that is somewhat similar, from what we understand. The Israelis would probably go and target that first thing and end up destroying it in some kind of a preemptive strike, meaning this may be a win-win for everyone. The Israelis, of course, beat up Hezbollah, Hamas, and Iran, and the United States doesn't have to worry about the Iranians moving forward in any kind of a nuclear weapons program. So
I don't know the details, but to me, right off the bat, just looking at it with hardly any knowledge about it, it seems like it would be kind of reckless to hit the nuclear facility, because how do we know that they wouldn't accidentally, cause nuclear particles or some type of substance to be put into the air and potentially, float into another country?
That is a good question, and I would have to answer that by saying Israel actually did that back in the day against the Iraqis, because the Iraqis did have a nuclear enrichment facility. They struck it and destroyed it, and from what we understand, the nuclear pollution was very minimal, because all of the nuclear enrichment facilities, like the one in Israel, they aren't really like nuclear reactors like Chernobyl or Fukushima, where they'll just start emitting radiation. It's really weird to explain. I don't really know how to explain it because I'm not much of a nuclear scientist. But from what I understand, they date different nuclear components. It's pretty much powder for the most part. And they just put it in the vats and they mix it together to get the right kind of mixture that they're looking for. And also they further refine the nuclear material as well. From what I understand, that actually isn't that high of a radioactive process when done properly. And even if it becomes radioactive, I believe it's something along the lines of a flash-off. Where it just quickly becomes radioactive and then it subsides nearly immediately. At least my understanding of that is based off of the guy in Japan who was working for TEPCO, or a subsidiary of TEPCO, and ended up mixing the nuclear components wrong. There was a flash off, and then he received the highest dosage of radiation that anyone had in history. And then for the next few weeks, he lived in agony until he died. Many of y'all,
fella, I remember him.
Yeah, many of y'all may know that story, and that's kind of my bare understanding, just that story alone, of how nuclear enrichment works, at least for nuclear energy. And I'm having a feeling that that's probably extendable into what the Iranians and the Israelis do to also create nuclear material as well. So going off of that, I would say there's probably not that big of a risk, at least for the Israelis, in striking that facility, or really the world as far as nuclear pollution would go. So hopefully the Israelis can actually fix this problem for us without us getting involved, because that would actually be a win-win for everyone. The Israelis would win over the Iranians. The world would win over the Iranians. We would ensure that there isn't another nuclear power in the world, and we wouldn't have had to have fired a single shot on our own. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, in my opinion, because this whole situation in between Israel and Iran may actually be a blessing in disguise for most of the world. But with that, we are on to the next one.
One thing that I wish the U.S. would come out and say just openly instead of keeping it a secret. Do we know for a fact whether or not Iran has developed nuclear weapons yet or not? Because without knowing that piece of information, it's really hard to analyze what to do with Iran, because obviously Israel would want to attack Iran, but if they have nukes, that changes the equation entirely, because you can't attack a nuclear country without risking an all-out nuclear exchange. And I don't doubt for a minute that Iran would do something stupid enough to launch nukes at Israel. I think they would. They're that radical. And Israel would end up launching nukes back at them. So, I don't know why nobody's addressed that yet.
I don't know why either. It's a great question. We don't know if the Iranians have nuclear weapons or not, and we haven't really gotten a good confirmation from any Western power if they have knowledge of their nuclear weapons existing or not. I have a feeling that based off of that, they probably don't exist. And also, if the Iranians did have a nuclear weapon, much like North Korea, they of course would have to test it at some point to see if it does work. And I'm sure that if they tried to test it, it would make world news whether people wanted it to or not. So from what we're understanding right now, I would say they probably don't have a nuclear bomb or a working nuclear bomb, because we haven't ever seen them try and test one, at least from what I know. But maybe the intelligence sphere knows otherwise, and they have tested one, but no one said anything about it, which would be really weird, though. That would be really odd, because there are seismic detectors around the world, and whenever a nuclear test is conducted, usually the seismic detectors are able to pick up that there was some kind of a seismic disruption from a nuclear weapon being tested, and that's usually how we know that a test has been made. So if the Iranians even did it in secret, I'm sure that some kind of a seismic detector in the Middle East, say in the UAE, would pick that up, and they would say, hey, something happened in Iran, like some kind of a massive seismic event. Once they ruled out earthquakes, they would probably say it's some kind of a nuclear bomb, and if there was any radiation, if it was a above-ground test, they would then be able to confirm that was a nuclear test and they do have a nuclear weapon. Of course, that's just my layman understanding of how a nuclear test would work. They, of course, could do an underground nuclear test, which would mitigate the spread of radiation in the air, over a large area, which then again, that would make it seem more so like it may possibly have been an earthquake in Iran, but it would be very hard to keep the information of a nuclear test secret. Very difficult. The United States was really lucky As far as the Los Alamos project went, of course, that's what the movie Oppenheimer is based on. A pretty good bit is the Manhattan Project in Los Alamos. But moving on from that, it was very difficult for them to even keep that secret. And of course, they had to move the facility into the middle of the desert where no one was at the time to even try and test this thing. And
You remember Kodak actually found out they were testing it because it messed up their film across the country.
Oh yeah. Now I remember that. Yeah. Now, and that also was something. I think the U.S. government went and like silenced them immediately, though. Because of wartime emergency powers. But anyways,
Yeah, I think they paid them off. They acknowledged that they had done something, but they paid them off for something like that to keep them quiet, or they either threatened them, one or the other.
Man, the U.S. government back in the 40s, they threatened some people, but usually they would have just paid you off. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. At least from what I understand, because I think at this point the Israelis would be safe attacking the Iranians, because to me it seems like they probably don't have any nuclear weapons, but that's just my understanding of it, and I could be wrong. I'm not the CIA. I don't have information of what's going on over there, but I do get a paycheck from the CIA. I'm just kidding, we don't. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says, Hamas is preventing civilians from leaving Gaza, and how should Israel proceed with their attack plans? And just some background information on this. Hamas had originally told the people in Gaza not to leave, and that it was simply Israeli propaganda about them needing to evacuate the area. So some of the civilians stayed and some tried to leave, and now the ones that tried to leave are being blocked from leaving. The Hamas terrorists are using their trucks and vehicles to block the roadways, and if you're curious about what that looks like, it's posted on our Twitter page, and they are blocking literally everyone from leaving. So it's very clear what they're trying to do here. They're trying to use these people as human shields. But the question here is, how should Israel proceed now that the civilians are being blocked from leaving? 43% said use precision attacks only on Gaza. 36% said civilians are simply collateral damage. 12% said unsure. And 9% said hold off the attacks until fixed. And on this one, it's a very tough question because, to simply say that civilians are simply collateral damage and it is what it is, that's kind of cold and callous a little bit. But at the same time, using only precision attacks on Gaza, that is going to greatly hinder Israel's ability to defend its country because they can't widespread wipe out the terrorists in one go and then deal with other threats that are going to pop up like Iran. Now they're going to be fighting on multiple fronts because they can't hit the entire area at once and blanket the area without killing a bunch of civilians. So the Hamas terrorists are playing this pretty smart from their strategy perspective. But I'm going to say hold off the attacks until fixed, and hopefully they can get it fixed very soon, or otherwise they might have to make that difficult choice, which will probably have to be, the civilians, getting in the line of fire. But Enforcer, what say you?
This is a really tough one, and I've got to be honest with y'all, the war in Israel right now and the war in the Gaza Strip is one that is posing some of the toughest moral dilemmas that we could see in a war so far. And Matthew is pretty right in saying that precision strikes would most likely mitigate civilian casualties. The issue, however, is where those precision strikes would occur, which is still on residential buildings with people inside of them. Because Hamas doesn't put their weapons inside of a building separate from the civilians. They put them in places that they know would look bad for the Israelis to attack. Apartment buildings, hospitals, anywhere they can. Because one thing that terrorists know is that there are rules of war and rules that people are supposed to follow. And I think that regardless, it should be followed to the letter, especially as far as civilian casualties go. They should be mitigated completely. But at the same time, the terrorists also know that as well, and they know what kind of optics it sends. That's why we see that Hamas, and I'll be showing that clip later on tonight as well, if y'all sit by on the stream until we get through the Ukraine news, we will be moving into Israel. But Hamas knows that if they keep these people in the northern part of the Gaza Strip and force them to stay there, and the Israelis continue to bombard that area and destroy Hamas equipment, but of course inevitably kill Gazan civilians, that is a great optic for Hamas because they can go and record a video of all the people that they forced to stay there getting killed and go, look what they're doing! Look what they're doing to us! And that's what they do. That's what the terrorists do to try and get some kind of legitimacy. And we can now see how sick and repulsing Hamas is when Israel actually goes and says, these civilians have an ability to leave, and we're not going to really level the place until they leave. And then Hamas goes, wait a minute, we're about to lose the human shields. Let's shove them all back up into northern Gaza, and let's keep them there so that way when the Israelis inevitably bomb the place, they'll look like the evil people. And that's something that is something you have to keep in mind when making this decision. And I would still have to say, civilian deaths at this point, from what Hamas has done, are going to be inevitable. Even if we completely remove the Israeli Air Force from the picture and it was just a ground campaign, there will be civilians that die at this point, either way. So it's very difficult to even give an answer without knowing that civilian casualties at this point in the Gaza Strip are most likely going to be an inevitable certainty. Going off of that, I would then have to say that we probably like to see the Israeli Air Force lower their attacks by the air to precision strikes and hopefully mitigate the civilian casualties as best as possible. It's inevitable at this point, though. I have to be quite honest with y'all. We are going to see things that are absolutely horrendous in the Gaza Strip, and it's very sickening to see that Hamas, who claims that they stand for the Palestinian people, will use the Palestinian people living in Gaza as a shield so that way they can be protected from the consequences of their own actions against the Israelis. And once again adds another level of sickness to this entire ordeal going on in Israel, or in Palestine and Israel. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, we are fresh out of poll questions for now, so we're moving into our Super Chat question segment. And up first, we have a very generous $50 donation from Sinful J. And thank you very much for that very generous support. Hey! And they said, "Hey, Enforcer, Don. Hey, Matt, Don. Keep your heads up. You do a great job. And what do you think will be Ukraine's strategy will be for the upcoming winter?"
And I gotta thank you so much for telling us to keep it up, Don. And thank you so much for bringing back the joke, Don. We love the jokes, Don. It makes us very happy, Don. And to answer your question, Ukraine's strategy during the winter will most likely be, and I've been trying to, there we go, finally. So we're probably going to see that Ukraine's strategy in the winter is to hang tight in most areas and then continue the offensive in the south. We've seen that the Ukrainians are pretty dedicated to trying to push the southern offensive home, and while they haven't made as much progress as we've been hoping for, they've only made it to Novoprokopivka. Hopefully, through the winter, they will be able to push on through to Tokmak. The VDV is, of course, still holding the highway in this area, which does appear to be making it a little bit more of a difficult battle than expected. But still, I think that's what they're going to be focusing on in the winter, is once again trying to push down the highway from Rabotne and towards the city of Tokmak. If they're able to achieve taking Tokmak, they would hopefully be able to make their way on down to Melitopol and eventually take that town and split the Russian lines into two. But that's really the only thing we can expect over the winter. And of course, not trying to crystal ball massively, because whenever anyone tries to crystal ball, it's usually incredibly wrong. And I don't want to, just try and pull stuff out of thin air in my head to make it sound like we know what will be happening. I have a feeling that they will conduct the southern offensive still, but beyond that, they'll probably be just holding out and waiting for more favorable weather past the spring of next year. And once again, moving on into the late spring and early summer. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, Sinful J. And thank you so much once again for the massive support and helping this channel to keep on running. It is folks like you who throw in support on your own free will that help this channel to keep on running ad-free and sponsor-free. Y'all have helped us be able to make this a job and do this 60 hours a week. And if it wasn't for folks like you, this wouldn't have been possible. And so thank you so much once again. And I hope I was able to answer your question pretty well. And we're on to the next one.
All right, and our second super chat, the first segment, goes to Richard Ager, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Richard, as well, for that support. Also, another longtime channel viewer. And Richard says, "What is your view on the possibility that Russia and China may be somehow behind the Hamas attacks with the intent of spreading U.S. efforts across multiple conflicts?" And Richard, that is a good point, because I saw earlier that the U.S. diplomats have called on China to try to use their pull in the Middle East to try to de-escalate the situation. I haven't seen a response from China yet, and it benefits China to have the U.S. tied up over there in the Middle East with all of our allies getting attacked, so that way they can do their funny business over there with Taiwan while we're distracted on multiple fronts. China is not a good player here, and they're not going to play by the rules. I think everybody knows that at this point. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say it's entirely possible, Richard, that the Chinese and the Russians may be the ones trying to facilitate this, but it is a very intricate web if they're doing that. We actually haven't seen a lot of direct Russian involvement in the conflict in Israel at the moment, or Chinese involvement. But there is one country that has had a massive amount of undeniable involvement that has huge connections to those two, Russia and China. That's Iran. The Russians and the Chinese could be operating through the Iranians and encouraging the Iranian government to carry on their efforts to sow chaos and disruption in the Middle East, so that way the U.S. gets drawn in. One thing everyone has to remember is that the Middle East is the crossroads of the entire world. That's no joke. The Chinese want to have the Middle East under their control under the Belt and Road program. It's really the final destination in the Belt and Road program right outside of Turkey. And of course, to get to Turkey, you have to get through the Middle East in every way, both by sea and land. The Russians also have a pretty big stake in the Middle East as well. We can see that they're continuously trying to get involved there in Syria and also in other surrounding countries like Iran, although it's more so of a diplomatic connection with Iran than a military one like in Syria. So both of them clearly have a idea or an objective of trying to bring the Middle East under their control. And the way that a lot of countries have been trying to do that over the past decades is through terrorist organizations. Everybody in the Middle East funds a terrorist organization. It's no joke. The Iranians like to fund the Hezbollah and the Hamas inside of Israel. Iran considers Israel to be the worst nation in the whole world, so they go and fund the terrorist groups there. Interestingly enough, while a lot of people don't think of Pakistan as being a Middle Eastern country, and y'all will be correct in believing that it's more of an Indian subcontinent or a Middle Asia country, it does have a lot to do with the terrorist activities that we see inside the Middle East. They were the large funders of the Mujahideen, the Taliban, and also Al-Qaeda, along with the Saudi Arabians, which also funded Al-Qaeda, although they kind of kept a more abstract view of terrorist organizations, unlike others like Pakistan and Iran, which directly fund and field the units. Saudi Arabia just kind of would throw monetary funding wherever they thought things would go their way. Iraq has also had a history of dealing with terrorist organizations as well, although theirs is a little bit more weird. They don't really directly fund them or anything, but some of the Iraqi population did heavily sympathize with terrorist organizations, which led to a decent amount of them getting some leeway. Sadly enough, while the Kurdish people are a cultural group inside of, say, the Middle East, in the areas of Iran, northern Iraq, and also southern Anatolia, they have been weaponized into terrorist groups by really everyone. The Syrians fund the Kurds inside of southern Anatolia and force them to conduct terrorist attacks against the Turks. Inside of Iraq, it is really everyone who pays the Kurds inside of northern Iraq to do whatever they want, and then, of course, the Iraqis respond to that, and it's a whole mess. And then in Iran, we just see them getting generally repressed by the Iranian government. So when you look at the Middle East, it's a cesspit of terrorism. That's really how everyone gets involved there, and everyone's pulling the strings. Whenever you see terrorist attacks occurring from any of these groups, it's not because they're operating on their own. They're operating for a larger power out there. Like the Kurds in southern Anatolia are operating on the behalf of Bashar al-Assad. The Kurds in northern Iraq are usually operating on the behalf of the Iranians or the Syrians, both trying to sow confusion in northern Iraq and also a lot of chaos. The Iranians, whenever you see anything happen with Hezbollah and Hamas, they're the ones directly behind that. So, of course, with the Iranians having larger connections and relations with both the Chinese and the Russians, then we have more strings being pulled. The Chinese and the Russians are pulling the strings of the Iranians, and then from there, the Iranians are pulling the strings of Hamas and also Hezbollah as well. So it's entirely possible that Russia and China are completely involved in this and trying to draw U.S. attention into other parts of the world, but they're doing it through Iran as a middleman instead of getting directly involved like they did, well, like the Russians did in Syria. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, Richard. And thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you have asked, one, incredibly amazing questions tonight. These are some really good questions. And two, support the channel and help us to keep this thing running. And if it wasn't for people going out of their way to support this channel, we wouldn't be able to run this thing. It's the only way that this channel runs, and we are greatly appreciative of folks like you, Richard, who throw in support, help it to keep running, and also ask amazing questions. That was a great one. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving back into the Ukraine war news and then into Israel.
All right, and the last one of the segment goes to Dragoon50, who puts in a $50 donation. And sadly, no comment to address with that massive support. But Dragoon, thank you very much for helping to keep the channel running and being so generous in supporting our work. And we do really appreciate it very much. And Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you, Dragoon, sorry, Dragoon50. Dragoon. That Dragoons are really. One second, hang on. I gotta play homage to the name Dragoon. A Dragoon cavalry.
Homage. Kroger.
But let's see here. This. Oh, dang it, the picture's too small. Come on, give me a good one. Let's see here. Where the hell? Oh, come on, hurry. I gotta find this thing. Here we go. It's a Dragoon. It's a British Dragoon, actually. But Dragoons are actually a heavy cavalry from the 18th and early 19th, well, really all the way through the 19th centuries and the 18th century. Really cool cavalry units, by the way. I think they're amazingly neat. But one group that is really cool to me are the Lancer cavalry groups. I think they're just some of the neatest. I don't know. I think lances and cavalry are just incredibly neat. But the Dragoons are also really cool. I believe they were some kind of a heavy shock cavalry, if I remember correctly. But still, really cool units. And thank you so much for having such a cool name and also throwing in support to help the channel to keep on running. If it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible. And I thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on rolling. You didn't throw in a comment, but your support helps us to continue to cover this news day in and day out, each and every day of the week. And if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And it's now time for us to move on back into the Ukraine news, starting off in the location unknowns with our first clip, which is United 24 talking about the Gripen. And so,
when you think of
here is the clip. And my man, he be sporting a new kind of sports shirt.
Man, he's moved on to chaps.
Man, I respect the drip. I really do. And so, here is the clip.
Sweden, what's the first thing that pops into your head? IKEA, Volvo, the Northern Lights, probably something like that. But most probably not something war related. However, Sweden has produced some pretty neat military tech over the past years. The CV-90, for example, Swedish infantry fighting vehicle that's also in service in Ukraine. But one of the most impressive developments is the Gripen, which translates to Griffin in English. Fully named Saab JAS-39 Gripen, the Swedish multi-role fighter aircraft has been discussed as maybe the best fit for Ukraine. So, welcome to Talking Tactics, where this week we want to discuss whether the Gripen really is good for Ukraine, and if yes, what the chances are of seeing this aircraft actually defending Ukrainian airspace anytime soon. Why is the Gripen a good fit? There are many reasons. The two most rudimentary are cost-effective operation. The Gripen is renowned for its cost efficiency, a crucial factor for Ukraine, which is confronted with the challenge of having to modernize its military while managing limited resources. An average flight hour with a Gripen of the CD variant costs around $5,800 US. Just to compare, according to Forbes magazine, an F-16 costs around $8,000 US to fly per hour. Although some statistics
Man,
are
what's Forbes
significantly
doing?
higher.
Like estimating aircraft times.
Man, Forbes out there going, how do we finance an army? And then they start putting together the cost numbers. It's like, why is Forbes looking into this kind of stuff? But anyways,
They went from doing the billionaires list to aircraft.
dude, they went from the billionaires list to how much does it cost to wipe out a certain number of military units per hour with one aircraft? It's like, why are you asking that question? Why? And I'm telling y'all why. Forbes is about to be putting people on the top 100 most wanted list, kind of like we did with Saddam Hussein and the boys back in Iraq. But anyways, moving on.
In context, a Eurofighter costs around $22,000 US per flight
Dang!
hour. An
I didn't know that. Okay, I'm actually pretty blown away by that. I didn't know the Eurofighter was that expensive to fly.
Does Switzerland use that?
No, I think they used the Gripen and the F-18.
Okay, I don't know who's paying $22,000 an hour, but I thought maybe Switzerland would.
The British, the Germans, and I believe the Italians pay that premium to fly that plane. That is extremely expensive, very expensive.
They can't fight the war very long at that kind of rate.
Man, dude, no wonder the British aren't able to buy a lot of stuff, because most of their money in the military is just going into flying this thing for 3 hours. Like, that's insanely priced right there compared to the comps. But anyways.
F-35 even more. Number 2, versatility. Gripen is a true multi-role fighter capable of air-to-air combat, air-to-ground strikes, reconnaissance, and even electronic warfare. Not only that, Gripen is extremely sturdy. It was specifically built to land and operate from roads or even rough fields during wartime. For a country like Ukraine that has seen its military and civilian infrastructure under attack for years, with airports and runways being an especially favored target of Russia, that's a golden feat. Technical characteristics. The first Gripens were produced in 1997. The Swedish Air Force has around 94 CD variants in service today. There were around 300 built altogether, sold also to the air forces of Hungary, Brazil, South Africa, and the Czech Republic. Right now, the newer Gripen EF is being developed and soon to be operational, with an even greater range and more modern radar and combat systems. But if Ukraine is to receive any of these jets, they will most likely be of the older CD variants. So that's what we're focusing on in the following section when talking about technical specifications. Engine. The Gripen is equipped with a Volvo RM12 engine, a derivative of the General Electric F404. So it's a licensed copy, basically. The engine provides a maximum thrust of around 80.5 kN, enabling high maneuverability and speed while being pretty fuel efficient, giving it a combat radius of approximately 800 kilometers. Size. The Gripen, compact design with a length of around 15 meters and a wingspan of around 8.4 meters, contributes to its agility and reduced radar cross-section, which means it's less detectable and thus has a higher chance of surviving. It weighs around 6,800 kilograms when it's empty. That's almost 1.5 tons less than an F-16. In other words, it's small and light. And although it's 2023 and even the Russians have a lot of high-tech anti-aircraft capabilities, sometimes even a couple of feet in size can make a difference when it comes to hiding, landing, or avoiding a threat. Weapons capabilities. Gripen boasts a wide range of options, including precision-guided air-to-air missiles, air-to-surface, anti-ship, and more. The Gripen can fire beyond visual range air-to-air missiles like the AMRAAM, which will be supplied to Ukraine. But it's also compatible with the Meteor, produced by the European manufacturer MDBA.
So really quickly, I do have to make this mention. This is being said as a plus to the Gripen. This is actually a standard for most Western modern aircraft. The F-16 and the Eurofighter Typhoon can also engage targets beyond visual range, and even aircraft like the Su-27 and the MiG-29 can also engage targets beyond visual range. That's actually fairly normal for most modern fourth-generation fighters. So while that's being stated here as a pretty big deal, or a huge benefit of the Gripen, this is actually more so just industry standard.
The Meteor has been celebrated as the best beyond visual range air-to-air missile in the world. Of course, this kind of bold and exaggerated statement can always be doubted, and there have been doubts that the Meteor is really the best there is. But in the end, whether it's the best or only one of the best, pretty great. And here's why. It has a range of around 100 kilometers and advanced radar-guided technology. However, its most exceptional feature is its propulsion concept. You can imagine the Meteor more as an air-to-air cruise missile than as a traditional guided air-to-air rocket. For thrust, it burns a solid fuel with a variable flow. Sounds complicated? Well, to construct it and come up with it, yes, it is. The result, however, is quite simple. It means that the Meteor can throttle its engine during different phases of flight, so slowing down or up instead of just burning it all after being ignited, making it very versatile. Now, after all these impressive facts and figures, a little realism. What are the actual chances that the Gripen's heading to Ukraine? How many? How long will it take? Well, during his visit in August, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and the Swedish government undermined their strong allegiance and will to cooperate. Also, Ukrainian pilots have undergone orientation training for the Gripen in Sweden. Orientation training is basically testing the water, playing around with basics and then evaluating what it would take and how long to really get the show on the road. And that's where the information for us kind of ceases. We don't really know much more, except that there have been multiple reports from Swedish media outlets that the government is debating the delivery of Gripen to Ukraine. All we can do is hope that as many of these planes will be delivered to Ukraine as soon as possible, obviously in coordination with the training of pilots and ground personnel. Anyway, that's it for Talking Tactics this week. Hit like and subscribe. If you want, you can also follow our Telegram channel to always stay up to date with the latest news from Ukraine.
And with that, that's the end of the clip right there from United 24. Really interesting to see them, though, going over all the pros and cons of the Gripen. And moving on from that and into our next bit of location unknowns, we also got to see the situation at the front lines, according to the British Ministry of Defense. It's mostly talking about the Black Sea Fleet's capabilities right now in the Black Sea. And of course, this report is largely confirming that it has been heavily undermined from the Ukrainian attacks on Sevastopol and the relocation of most of the fleet either into the Sea of Azov or into the port of Novorossiysk. Very little of the ships that were once inside of Sevastopol are still there, and most of them are cheaper, more inefficient, smaller, and most likely not able to enforce the Russian blockade that was set out months earlier. Moving on from that report and on to our casualty report for the day, the losses were incredibly high for the infantry and for the Bobcats.
More Bobcats. I'm telling you, man. Look at these losses. They're staying high in every category. I'm seeing huge losses in the artillery division there. Also, they got a plane, too. It's looking sweet.
It's looking sweet, pretty sweet. 4 Bobcat skid steers were lost. 970 Russian soldiers were lost over the past 24 hours. 24 armored personnel carriers were also destroyed, along with 22 supply trucks, 9 tanks, 26 artillery pieces, 1 drone, 1 aircraft, and 1 anti-aircraft warfare system. Overall, it's a pretty good loss amount over the past 24 hours. Not as high in the tanks and APV categories as we've seen before, but beyond that, still doing impressively well and knocking out Russian manpower in the area around the Avdiivka offensive. Moving on from the casualty report and on into northern Ukraine, we also saw an unfortunate sight of a Ukrainian supply truck running over a mine near Izium and exploding. Sadly, the driver was killed. He was a 61-year-old man, and unfortunately he did die in the mine explosion. But once again, showing the importance of Ukrainian sappers clearing out the areas of Ukraine to ensure that they're safe once again for civilians to live and operate in. And this is once again a stark reminder of the horrors of war that were once surrounding Izium for months on end. Moving on from that and into our next clip near the Crimean forest, we also saw a Ukrainian T-64 Balot moving around inside of the woods. Oh! And so here's the clip. You see the Balot driving down the road. And man, I gotta say, man, this Balot, man, it's a lot.
Hey.
You can see the Balot passing on by.
Well, that ground's already looking nasty.
Well, it's not that bad, but it is looking like it's getting there. It's starting to get a little moist. But with that, that's the end of that clip, and nice to see a little Balot on the Crimean forest area. Moving on from that and down to Bakhmut, we also got to see that the 79th Brigade was also hitting Russian forces in this area today as well. Not really a lot of frontline action happened, but we did get to see the drones, of course, attacking Russian positions near this destroyed railroad track. We see some smoke coming out and a Russian kind of moving around and trying to figure out what to do. We now see the drone coming on in and slamming into the Russian position, and it got him. Rest in pieces. We now see another drone coming on in, and it looks like the Russians really are resting in pieces. That's the end of that clip. But nice to see a little drone attack occurring on the Russians here and there as a snack. Moving on from that, we also got to see some crazy, insane battlefield footage from the 3rd Assault Division in the southern flank of Bakhmut. Here's the clip. They threw a grenade, they fibbed it, but then they recovered it, which was pretty wild to see. We can hear the firefight going on, explosions in the distance, laying low, stuff just flying overhead. The soldier in front of the cameraman is about to whip out a nade. He throws it, it bounces off the tree, lands back in the trench. Another Ukrainian picks it up, hot potatoes it towards the Russian position, and then it blows up. Very lucky for those guys that they were able to pull that off. That was insane. And also you can see the heavy kind of fighting that's still going on in the southern flank as the 3rd continues to try and push the Russians back even in more adverse weather conditions than normal. Moving on from that, now the area of Bakhmut, we're going to be bypassing the Donetsk region, considering we covered all of that news earlier, and now we're going to be moving on down to the southern front, where once again we haven't seen much frontline activity. Moving on to our first clip, we did get to see a Tu-S3 Akitsia being hit by a Ukrainian FPV drone, destroying it outright. And we can hear more music. And we can see the drone flying on into the Tu-S3 and taking it on out. Look at that. Slamming into the rear of the turret, setting the thing alight, and cooking it. Man, I gotta tell you, man, if the Ukrainians were cooks, they'd be better than Gordon Ramsay, because I've seen them cook up more Russian tanks than anyone's cooked up a meal in real life.
Man, the Ukrainians don't leave these Russian tanks raw. They cook them up. Well done. No medium rare. Cut that crap out. We're going well done.
Man, I'm telling you, that sounded actually pretty hardcore. That was like a hype speech for cooking, man. You're like, it's going in, we're going in. But anyways, that's the end of the clip. Love to see it. Wonderful to see a little Akitsia cooking. Moving on from that and over into the area of Reboltny, we also got to see a little Ukrainian M113 scooting along the front lines today. This one was provided by none other than the U.S. Army.
Oh, that ground's looking even nastier. Good lord.
Man, that ground be looking slushy, man. Call this thing an icy because it be slushy. But the M113 is trucking on. I bet you it's struggling, though.
You wouldn't want to get stuck or break down in this junk.
Oh, hell no. Oh, my lord. It's the Sea of Kiev. And they're driving through it. Hell no, I would not deal with this, man. This is horrendous. And y'all can see the Rasputitsa has arrived. This means that the offensive in this area has largely stopped for the time. There's going to be no way to move forward in massive ways with this kind of weather. Moving on from that and into the next clip, we also saw Russian forces getting hit in this area as well, just to leave the area on a high note. And we hear Chad music as a Chad bomb hits near the Russians. Look at that. And a lot of them drop and give them 20. Man, you know what they say, $20 is $20. And with that, that's the end of the clip, but great to see that they were able to, of course, do a little bit of artillerying in the area. Moving on from that, we also saw in the area of this town, which I'm not even going to try and pronounce, well, actually I am, it is Krasno, we're going to call it Krasno. We saw some Russian equipment moving into northern Crimea in Krasno. Here's the clip. MTLBs, some freight cars, some 2S1s, SPGs, more freight cars, more SPGs, a command truck, a couple of command trucks that look pretty damn old, some supply trucks, some more command trucks. I mean, they don't even have this many commanders. Why in the world are they bringing all the command trucks up there? Some very old fuel cars, and then that's the end of the train. And still, it is still, I'm not even going to say that. Moving on from that clip, that's the end of all the news we got in Crimea today. We just kind of saw some force movements happening. And also, one final clip that we got in the area of Kropyvnytsky. We saw some Ukrainian Air Force ground crew preparing some missiles for flight and just making sure that they were ready to go. These appear to be R-27ERs and R-73s, like the title suggests. We can see an R-73 right there, and we can also see them using some older computational systems to get them running. But moving on from that little bit, it's now time for us to move on into the next part of the news, which is all the way down in Israel. That's right, folks. We're getting on into the Israel news right now. Starting off with our first bit of news, the Iron Dome has been incredibly successful in shooting down a large amount of Hamas rockets being fired in Israel. Israel. But every once in a while, the Hamas system does, the Iron Dome system does fail against the Hamas rockets. We unfortunately saw that today in Tel Aviv, as one rocket did make it through and ended up slamming into the middle of the city. And here's the clip. You see the rocket hit right down there. We don't know if there were any civilian casualties, but it does appear to have landed in the middle of a populated area. Hopefully people had sought shelter because of the air alarm that was sounding over the city. Moving on from Tel Aviv, and we also once again have not heard from Yuri Bench since the first day of this war. We're hoping that Yuri Bench is okay, because he does live in Tel Aviv, and I would hate to know that he is not in good shape or safe. But moving on from that into the northern area of Israel, we've also been hearing some concerning news that Hezbollah is starting to ramp up their attacks in this area, and it does appear that they are becoming an active belligerent in the war. Moving on to our first clip, we did see Hezbollah attacking multiple Israeli positions. This video was actually published by Hezbollah itself, so we're having a feeling that there's probably no way for them to enforce copyright. So we're just going to allow the audio. Well, I don't know if they license the audio. I have a feeling that a terrorist organization doesn't really care about licensed audio, so we're going to mute it anyways. We can see them using Google Earth to show the Ukrainian, Ukrainian, I'm getting mixed up, the Israeli positions. And we can now see them pointing out the Israeli bases on the map. I find it interesting that their symbol is the front of an AK-47 and a red sun. Like, that is a
Is that what it's supposed to be?
Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be. That's the front end of an AK-47 or an AKM.
Why do they have the front end of the AK like contouring around the red dot? That's messing me up a little bit.
Oh no, that's actually how the muzzle brake is shaped.
Oh.
It's to mitigate recoil, and send the gas in one specific direction. But we see Hezbollah hitting the Israeli base on top of this mountain, and it does appear that they're trying to knock out the radar installation inside of this fob. You can now see them firing the next missile. Can't really tell what kind of missile system this is. It is wire-guided, however. Which begs the question, is this a TOW missile launcher, or is this some kind of a Cornets? We can't really tell for sure. But you now see them hitting the next Israeli base on another hill in the area. We now see them firing at... Wait a minute, hang on. We actually got a good look at the rocket system right there. Oh yeah, that's a Cornets. This is actually a Russian missile system being used right here. We now see them hitting another radar tower. Not actually hitting the fob with that shot, but hitting the radar tower. For some reason, they're trying to target and destroy the Israelis' radar capabilities in this area of the border. We now see them going for the next fob and putting out some interesting text on it. We don't know what it means, but we can now see them hitting the next radar tower over here to the right side of the screen, knocking it out as well. I just wonder why, and I have a couple of theories, but not really sure if any of them are quite good. Maybe they're trying to knock out Israeli radars so that way they can't detect incoming rockets from southern Lebanon. Maybe the Syrian Air Force, or whatever is left of it, is about to get involved in the war, or the Iranian Air Force is going to try and get involved, and so they're trying to knock out Israeli radars to lengthen the response time by the Israelis from airborne attacks. And now we can see them using some kind of an improvised MLRS that has a very shaky launching system, which makes me feel it's going to be wildly inaccurate, but funnily enough, it actually is hitting kind of in the fob, at least with one of the rockets. We see more of their rockets just landing wildly around the compound. And now we can see that they've moved their attack onto another installation on another hill in the area. And we can now see them showing some specific equipment on the fob that is apparently interesting to them. It appears to be more radar mounts.
They just blew something out of there on the right.
They did. Blew it out like a night after eating shellfish. But...
Oh.
But we can see them continuing to hit the compound. But what's so bizarre about this is that they aren't actually trying to attack the IDF soldiers inside. It seems more so that their priority has been knocking out the radars instead. Man, and I got to tell you, the pro-Hamas terrorists have been coming into the live chat tonight, going, "From the land into the sea, Palestine will be free." You know what's going to be free in a minute? The cost of this war is going to be free, because you know why? America's going to get involved. This is going to get out of hand, and then we're going to start bankrolling everyone in the region. That's why it's going to be free.
Man, the Hamas is about to figure out why America doesn't have free healthcare in a minute.
Yeah, they're about to see that B-2 come roaring over the middle of the Gaza Strip and go, oh, so that's why they have so much money put in their military. But anyways, moving on from that, we then saw the Israelis countering the Hezbollah attacks by striking Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon, which we can see here in these clips. Ding, and they got that one, ding, and they got another one, and ding, they got another one. And ding, they got a fourth one, and come on, fifth time's the charm. So with that's the end of the clip right there, but still pretty interesting to see the Israeli Defense Forces, of course, taking action against the Hezbollah, and it does appear that this is starting to become a full-blown battle of the northern border area. Moving on from that and into our last clip, we saw that a Israeli drone wiped out a quote-unquote Lebanese squad. We're not really sure if this means that they're a part of the Lebanese army or if they're a part of Hamas or Hezbollah, but all we know is that it is a Lebanese squad. So I'm assuming that this is actually direct action being taken against the Lebanese army, but here's the clip. And we can see that they were taken out. And we can see they're double tapping as well.
Rawl said in the chat, are shellfish halal?
It's halal. It's
Or
halal.
halal. Whatever. Is it halal? I don't think so. Is it kosher? I don't know. Couldn't tell you.
Let's see here.
Unfortunately, do you happen to know? I don't think so though.
Is shellfish halal? Shellfish is halal to Muslims. This is because the Quran states that all food found in the sea is halal. Huh. So apparently it is.
Kosher?
Man, dude, I don't understand that logic because oh yeah, is it kosher? Let's pull that up. Is shellfish kosher? Let's see. Kosher rules. Land animals must have seafood must have fins and scales. Eating shellfish is not allowed. It is forbidden to eat birds of prey. So
well,
no.
That's pretty strict. Jeez.
Yeah, man,
birds of prey.
Birds of prey, chickens. Good luck, pal. Never eaten that. Yeah, like never.
They definitely aren't eating any F-35s then, or any fighter jets. Those are off the table.
Dude, that hungry Israeli with a fork and the knife sitting in front of the F-15. That's it. Then the commander comes up. No, it's not kosher. But anyways, moving on from those clips in northern Israel, it's now time for us to move on down towards the Gaza Strip. Many of y'all may be interested in knowing this, but Hamas actually does have a navy. And I did not know this until now. The Israelis are actually fighting the Hamas navy at sea, and we got to see this today. It appears to be more so of like a boat fight than an actual naval battle, but still pretty wild to watch. So here's the clip. Also, this is from the perspective of the Israeli navy, which is intercepting the Hamas boats. And they got themselves some M4 carbines, and we can already hear the machine gunner on the front of the boat opening fire. You see the machine gunner laying down the heat. You see them firing at the Hamas terrorists. We see the boats now on fire.
What are they doing swimming in the water?
You know, they just enjoying times, fun times.
Oh, well, he just dropped a little something for him.
Oh, man. We see the burning boat. We see some waters on the lens. See
they should know it's not a good time for a swim.
They should know. They should know. But we're going to end that clip there because we got a lot of extra news to cover. But if y'all would like to see the rest of that clip and look at what the Israeli Navy was able to pull off today, make sure to go into the link in the description below for the day 598 map, click on it, and then go into the sea near the Gaza Strip. Look for the one that has the boat symbol. Click on that, and then you'll have an interesting time watching how the Israeli Navy deals with Hamas terrorists that try to decide to skim the shoreline up to the area of Ashkelon to once again try and conduct another little mini genocide. I can't actually show y'all most of that clip, that's why I had to stop it off right there, because the Israeli Navy apparently takes no quarter when it comes to terrorism, which is kind of how it works around the world. So with that, we're going to be moving on to our next clip from Kerch Beach, where we got to see some medical evacuations being conducted by the Israeli Defense Forces, which was really operating with some professionalism here in this clip. We can see their Black Hawk flying on in. We can see the Israeli soldiers in the back hopping on out, securing the area so that way medical evacuations can occur. We now see them opening up the side door. And we now see the soldiers hopping in. We now see them getting ready to bring in the wounded as well. They're dragging in the first stretcher. And they got in the second. And now they're closing the door and the helicopter's getting on out of there already. We see that right here. We now see them opening the door and getting the wounded out. Actually, they're loading in even more wounded. It appears that they offloaded the last ones, and this is now later on in the day. They're now closing the door, and they're on their way again, getting the wounded on out of the area. And now they're on the way. And that's the end of the clip. But I gotta say, that was really something as well. We didn't really get to see a lot of what was happening outside the helicopter, but just with the sheer speed of how they were able to hop in and hop out of the helicopter and also load in the wounded, shows us that the Israeli Defense Forces, while being a conscript force, mind you, is well trained beyond belief, even on the average rank and file soldier level for the most part. From what we understand, those are just normal rank and file Israeli infantry, airborne infantry in the back of those helicopters there, yet they still operated with an amazing level of speed and professionalism, the likes of which we really don't see from either side inside of Ukraine, showing that the Israelis really have their act together incredibly well. However, the act isn't being put together too well inside of the Gaza Strip by the Hamas terrorists, as we saw today on film that Hamas is deliberately blockading the major roads leading south through the Strip and forcing civilians to once again stay in the north, so that way they can use them as human shields later on. This video was taken from the Israeli Air Force, showing clear proof that the Hamas terrorists are not allowing civilians to flee south.
יש לו מחסום ודאי, וכל מי שנמלט מזרחה הוא כנראה מנסה לרדת דרומה איכשהו.
בהמשך, כאילו, להצטרף דרומה.
You see the blockade down there. I mean, you see masses of civilians trying to move south that have been completely blocked from going down there. It's horrendous to see this kind of stuff because we know the inevitable fact is that Israel is going to have to respond to what the Hamas terrorists have done, no matter how much they want to try and mitigate civilian casualties like we are seeing right here. But Hamas is well bent and adamant that if you don't want to die, they're going to force you to die in this war that they just started. And that is absolutely sickening. I've got to be honest with y'all. The Israelis are going to start inflicting a large amount of civilian casualties because of the actions of Hamas right here. But if that means that Hamas will be completely dismantled for the rest of all time, and we see that this doesn't happen again, where Hamas uses civilians as a weapon and a shield for themselves, I think that's going to have to end up being an unfortunate reality in this war so far, is that some civilians will probably have to die, so that way Hamas will cease to exist, and these people can hopefully live without being used as a shield against armed conflicts that Hamas started. This is absolutely sickening to see, and absolutely sickening to think that Hamas is going to force the Israelis' hands into, of course, inevitably killing civilians. Because that's what this is. And the Israelis will have to respond. The Israelis cannot go without a response. They must respond to what Hamas has done. And the Hamas is going to make sure that once they respond, they are going to try and vilify them by forcing these civilians to be targets for the Israelis. That is absolutely the lowest of the low. And if Hamas actually had any decency, like people are saying, there's a lot of people have been saying that Hamas is a decent group of freedom fighters. It's just that they went across the border and executed and genocided Israelis just because of all of the injustices that have been done against them. Well, if they were such a good group of freedom fighters, who in the hell is forcing their hand to keep these civilians here so that way they become victims of Israeli strikes as well? No one's doing that except for them. That's a decision that they came out with, and they even show that they don't give a damn about the Palestinians, and they're nothing more than pawns in their game against the Israelis. And the only people that come first in Hamas's mind is themselves. That is just the lowest of the low right there. And I'm going to tell you this, I will never support the Hamas terrorist group, nor will I support Hezbollah, because if the argument is made that they really do stand for the Palestinian people, then I think that no one should stand for the Palestinians, because this certainly isn't protecting Palestinian people. This is putting them in the way of danger, and this is putting them in the way of an inevitable conflict in between Hamas and Israel that we already know is going down right now. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that little clip and into the next one, where of course we saw that the Israeli Air Force is continuing their airstrikes in the area, but once again keeping in mind that these civilians that may be in northern Gaza where these airstrikes are happening probably aren't able to leave because Hamas is forcing them to stay. And we can see the Israeli airstrikes hitting the area, of course hitting what they believe to be Hamas sites. And once again, keep in mind, civilians could entirely be leaving this area, but they can't because the Hamas is going to force them to stay here. And the Israelis, of course, are having to deal with the dilemma: do we wipe out the Hamas sites and end up taking out civilians that are being forced to stay here by Hamas, or do we not and allow them to maybe conduct further attacks in the future and even kill more Israelis? It's unfortunate to see. And I don't really have a lot to say over these clips. We're just watching continuous strikes by the Israeli Air Force on what's believed to be Hamas positions. We see the strikes still hitting the buildings. I've got to tell y'all, this war is going to be a horrendous one. If we all thought the war in Ukraine has been bad, hold your horses, because this is about to be horrendous, especially in the amount of civilian casualties that are going to be sustained because of what is happening with Hamas not allowing civilians to flee further south. And of course, you know, it sounds weird to say that the Hamas is forcing the Israelis into these strikes, but the Israelis are going to conduct these strikes regardless. It is Hamas that is putting these people into danger and forcing them to stay literally in the crosshairs of an Israeli Air Force attack. That is what's going to end up taking these people out. That's what's going to end up killing thousands of innocent civilians, is because Hamas wants these civilians to be killed, so that way they can try and radicalize more people, lie to them about why they were stuck in North Gaza, and also ensure that in the eyes of the world, they can make it look like they're just the innocent victims of Israeli attacks, when in all honesty, Hamas forced innocent civilians that had nothing to do with this, and were more than happy to flee to southern Gaza to avoid the bloodshed that was going to happen. They forced them to stay here and forced them to be targets for the Israelis. That is just sickening. I don't think we have seen this in the war in Ukraine from either side, especially even the Russians. And the Russians are damn animalistic with how they act in Ukraine, especially against the citizenry. We haven't even seen this kind of stuff being conducted by them. Hamas is truly on a level lower than the Russians. And for 2 years now, the Russians have been the worst of the worst that we've seen out there. And Hamas has just stepped in and taken the cake from them with what they're doing. But moving on from this clip, that's largely all the videos and information that we have from inside of Israel today. Of course, the land campaign has not started yet, and I would assume that we're probably going to see a prolonged Israeli air war campaign before the ground offensive begins. So I would give the Israeli ground offensive another 2.5 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, before it actually begins. But of course, we don't really know, because that's crystal balling. But moving on from that, in the news in Israel, it is now time for us to move on up into the city of Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy on day 598 of the war. And so, without further ado, here is the speech. And let me switch it over to Ukrainian, and here we go.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Завершується цей тиждень ППО для України, тиждень посилення. Перед зимою це ключовий пріоритет, і саме час подякувати партнерам за нові рішення про підтримку. Рішення цього тижня: Нідерланди, перемовини з Марком Рютте в Одесі, рішення про додаткові ракети для Петріотів, підтримка наших наземних операцій та морських експортних коридорів. Є й оборонний пакет, про який було оголошено на Рамштайні. Дуже дякую. Є пакети від Іспанії, пакети від Британії, Норвегія, Фінляндія, дякую, Німеччина, спільний оборонний пакет Чехії та наших друзів з Данії. Дякую всім лідерам за виконання наших з ними домовленостей. Окрім додаткових ракет, для ППО будуть нові пускові установки. Працюємо над різними видами систем. Будуть запасні частини для систем, що вже Україна використовує. Звичайно, буде і артилерія, снаряди, передусім, безпілотники, бронетехніка. Всі лідери, які нам допомагають, повністю поінформовані щодо актуальної ситуації на полі бою. Світ розуміє, до чого готується Росія та які терористичні ходи може планувати. Знаємо і те, як відповідати окупанту, і будемо відповідати потужно. Перед засіданням Рамштайну в Брюсселі була хороша, дуже потрібна зустріч з міністром Остіном та новим очільником американських військових генералом Брауном. Чітке підтвердження підтримки України, чітка готовність разом посилювати наші дії та продовжувати тиснути на окупанта і восени, і взимку. І, до речі, Сполучені Штати на Рамштайні оголосили про своє співголовування в коаліції F-16 разом з Нідерландами і Данією. Важливе рішення. Дуже дякую. Відмінні переговори відбулись з урядом Бельгії. Ми вдячні за приєднання Бельгії до нашої коаліції F-16, за лідерство у використанні заморожених російських активів. Це дійсно потрібний крок. Саме Бельгія стала першою країною, яка направить Україні кошти, що згенеровані російськими активами. Ми працюємо з іншими країнами ЄС, всього світу, щоб вони використовували кошти агресора саме так, як це буде справедливо, на захист від агресії. Окремо я хочу відзначити конференцію в Хорватії, яка відбулася цього тижня щодо гуманітарного розмінування. Майже третина нашої території під небезпекою через міни, снаряди, які не розірвались. Очевидно, що потрібна глобальна підтримка очищенню нашої землі від російських мін. І зараз в Хорватії були учасники конференції. І саме щодо цієї проблеми понад 40 країн та міжнародних організацій є нові рішення про підтримку в розмінуванні. Я дякую кожній країні, яка долучилась. У час, коли терор розповзається світом, важливо, щоб світ давав максимально однозначний сигнал, що захист від терору ніде не ослабне. Звичайно, наші воїни на всіх напрямках, де зараз особливо гаряче, Авдіївка, Мар'їнка, ключові точки Донеччини, Кліщіївка, Курдюмівка, Андріївка, Старомайорське, звичайно, Куп'янський напрямок, Запорізька область, Оріхів, Роботине, Вербове, Новопрокопівка. Дякую усім, хто тримає позиції, знищує російські війська. Кожен день цих битв – це життя, які віддаються заради нашої держави, і це життя всієї України, яке рятується щодня, щоночі, кожним успішним боєм. Це так важливо. Слава вам, воїни! Слава нашому народу! Дякую всім в світі, хто нам допомагає. Слава Україні!
And
Herold Slava.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on the 598th day of the war, and that is the beginning of the second half of this stream. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so we are entering the final question segment and poll segment of the stream, and our very first poll says, Israel is putting the quote-unquote Iron Beam laser weapon system in operation ahead of schedule, and what are your thoughts? And also, Enforcer, I'm not sure if you've heard of this or not. I'm sure you have. But this thing is going into service a lot earlier than expected. And it's supposed to replace the Iron Dome system. And this will be a laser weapon system which shoots down the missiles instead of actually firing actual missiles to actually intercept the missiles. So it's a pretty big leap in technology, to say the least. And if you want to see a picture of it, it's actually on our Twitter page as well.
Peter, the Twitter's here.
We haven't done
In
that
the
in so
meantime-
long. Wait, hang on. Let me go.
Yes.
Let me go and pull that up real quick. We can grab that, Matthew. By the way, y'all, link to our Twitter in the description below, my fellas. Make sure to go in there, follow the Twitter. It helps. Also, hit the like button. We're up to 1,842 likes. If the likes were a year, right now Kansas would probably be bleeding about right now. But anyways, moving on from that. Oh, look at that.
There it is. Look at that. An Iron Beam.
Man, it detects your eyeball as a target, shoots a giant laser beam in your eye. Oh my eye! But anyways, that's pretty cool. We've seen something like this being implemented on U.S. ships. It's largely a similar system, but that is really interesting to see. And it looks like laser warfare is finally starting to make its debut. Not in the way we thought it would, but it's still making it to the forefront now, and hopefully we can see that this thing is a lot more cost efficient in dealing with the threat. The laser systems, from what we understand, are actually cheaper per burst than per missile, considerably cheaper, and hopefully this will be helping the Israelis to cut down the cost of the defense of their country from incoming rockets like we're seeing right now. But really cool.
What prevents Israel from simply turning this thing up on high and pointing it at the Hamas terrorists and letting it loose?
Probably because it takes a while for it to cook, It doesn't cook immediately, and also it might be, I think it's actually a war crime to use a laser weapon system against a soldier because it could blind
So you can shoot a soldier, but you can't fire a laser at a soldier?
I think that's the standing rule, but I might be wrong on that right now.
It's kind of strange if that's actually a rule. It would seem like a laser would probably be the equivalent of a bullet. But does it really matter if the bullet goes through someone or a laser hits them? It seems like the same effect.
Well, I mean, a bullet that passes through.
I'm taking issue with that rule.
Well, Matthew, you can take issue with the rule, and I deny your issue. I'm just kidding. That's a good question, really. I don't know why it may be against the rules. But maybe it's because, maybe it fries them instead of shooting them. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe they consider it to be inhumane. And Drunken said, Geneva Convention. Yeah. They say it's a war crime, but I don't know. I mean, if you make a laser powerful enough where it's like a phaser in Star Wars, I don't really think it should be a war crime, because at that point it's pretty instantaneous, kind of like a gunshot. But anyways, with that, really interesting. And also, Matthew, let's get back to that poll.
So 83% said great and battlefield testing is good. 8% said unsure. 6% said that's cool, but I'm kind of indifferent. And 3% said not good, don't rush to development. And one thing that we have to recognize, that even though war is a horrific thing, one of the worst things humanity will ever experience in humanity's existence, by far, and probably eventually the thing that'll take out humanity is probably ourselves, because we're going to end up killing each other if the tensions keep rising the way they're doing. One thing that comes out of war is technological advancements. A lot of our technology has come from war. A lot of the things that we've become very used to have resulted from World War II, and the technology that had to be innovated very quickly to win the war. So I think this is one of these systems, the laser weapon system that's being developed here, that'll probably have applications in the civilian world later, but obviously it's still in development right now for the military, so it'll be a long time before that actually happens. But battlefield testing is only the best way to test this technology, and it looks like Israel's going to put it to use. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it's really interesting to see that we're constantly advancing technology, and we can see that Israel's starting to implement their advanced technology as well. I would have to agree with you, Matthew. You know something that I found out the other day that was absolutely bizarre to me? Did you know that most of the crops we enjoy nowadays, like corn, bell peppers, certain kinds of grain, I believe, like wheat, did you know that most of those actually were irradiated in the 50s, and the specific strain, the genome of the seed that is used for these plants actually is the result of decent amounts of irradiation, which made them more hardy to weather changes, severe weather changes, and also harsh climates.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I did not know that either, because I thought that stuff sounded like Fallout-y, like something that you would hear in the Fallout universe, but it actually turns out that's true, and that's also why our crops nowadays are actually invasive species if not maintained. That's actually a big problem, is that most of the farm-raised variety of crops in America have been so bioengineered to be so hardy and versatile, at least in their survivability, that they usually end up overpowering and killing local flora and things like that whenever they're left unchecked, which is actually something that I did not know until about 2 or 3 days ago, which was just absolutely nuts. But once again, to get back to why I was bringing up that fact, the reason why they were so heavily irradiated is because America, right after the end of World War II, got interested in nuclear technology, nuclear bombs, because of what we did to the Japanese. And it was a direct result of us trying to create a weapon of war. Then from that, we created nuclear energy, and we also tried to figure out how to use radiation in a positive way. And we actually did, interestingly enough. It was actually a huge benefit, at least to the United States, to develop crops that were more resistant to weather changes. But still, like Matthew said, a lot of our innovations are entirely from war. Really, everything extends from war. Hell, even the microwave, you can trace back its technology to wartime experiments and trying to figure out how a microwave would work. More so for other reasons rather than cooking. But beyond that, it does appear that this thing will probably start to enter the civilian sphere in some way, shape, or form in the future. Who knows? Maybe they'll start to use lasers for welding if they're able to refine the technology well enough. I don't know how that will work, but maybe so. In the future, we'll see that. But still, I hope that
Now, real quick, before you move on from that one, zoom in to Israel real quick, to Tel Aviv.
Tel Aviv? Yaffo?
So it says Tel Aviv Yaffo. I propose a change. It should be Tel Aviv NAFO, so that way Ukraine can get involved.
Man, that is a good idea. I'm not going to lie. Is Super Bunker 9000 here tonight?
I don't think so.
Oh, man, he's like pretty much like the NAFO rep. There's a lot of NAFO folks in here tonight too, but like for some reason, Super Bunker's like our NAFO rep because he has the Lego set named after him. But still, I would agree with that, man. That's a pretty cool idea. But you know what's weird? You know what's really weird is like the area in between Tel Aviv and the West Bank, like the actual official border of the West Bank, is something like only 13 miles. That's actually pretty nuts when you think about it.
Man, it's just like a hop and a skip over there. Like Israel is not a big place at all. Like this, it's really a small area. That's why, like I was telling you earlier today when we weren't on stream, it's kind of curious how long it's taking them to get weaponry into position to conduct the invasion of Gaza, considering they only have to travel a small distance to actually transport weaponry, fuel, supplies, etc. And they seem to be taking such a long time. It's like they're traversing the size of the United States or something.
Well, it does take time. It takes time, effort, materials, Jaffa cakes. But one thing that's nuts to me, though, Matthew, like putting that into scale, like let's take 13.6 miles and put that into scale here in Birmingham. How big would that be? Measure the distance.
This is urban sprawl here in Birmingham. This is a long distance anywhere you go.
Huh, that's actually a lot further than I thought it would be. So that's like all the way from the west side of downtown Birmingham, almost all the way out to Leeds. That's actually like kind of big when you really think about that. But then when you put it into scale, it isn't that big because I did end up driving all the way out to Oxford and Anniston today, which was like a whole hour drive. And y'all probably be seeing what that was about later on next year. But yeah,
They do be wilding in Leeds, but they do have a Buc-ee's though.
Man, dude, they have a cool Buc-ee's. Like, I don't mean to rabbit hole real quick for all of y'all, but I gotta say, I'm not gonna lie, this is actually pretty nuts. We have this thing in the United States called Buc-ee's, if you're not from America. It's this, like, super-sized gas station that has, like, 200 pumps, and it's a true cult. Like, if you've ever seen a Buc-ee's, you know it's got, like, a cult-like following. Like, look at this. They've got different kinds of, I think this is different kinds of like beef jerky. You can get different flavors. This is ghost pepper, which is pretty bizarre. They got liquor up in this thing. I don't drink, but still pretty wild. They got pre-made like sandwiches and stuff, and these little like yogurt things. They have like loads of food, and they even have these freaking weird beaver mascots that wander around every once in a while. The place is insane, but let me try and see if I can get you all a picture of the pumps. Because I'm sure to many people outside of America, the amount of pumps at these supersized gas stations would be insane. And it is insane, even to us in the States. But let me see if I can find a picture of that. This is just one part of the station. This isn't the whole thing. There's like 20-something pumps under this roof. And here's another main station up front. It's literally insane. The place is literally just unbelievable to every degree. But they do have a cool Buc-ee's, but that would be outside. That would actually be in the West Bank. If downtown Birmingham was the very shoreline of Israel, that would be inside of the West Bank over there in Leeds. But with that, I hope that kind of puts a rabbit hole out there that's kind of interesting, and also put Israel into scale. It's actually a fairly small country, and it also puts. It honestly kind of puts their military exploits in the area into scale as well, historically, because taking the Sinai Peninsula sounds like a massive undertaking, but then when you consider that the Sinai Peninsula isn't actually that big, it then kind of puts it back into scale how big Israel's military operations really are. They're actually more so on a microscopic scale. The Sinai Peninsula is probably about the same size as the Balaklia counteroffensive was up here in this area, just north of Kharkiv. And putting that into picture, kind of seems like, they do great. I mean, they're an amazing military, but they, aren't covering ground that major countries are having to cover. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And our next poll says, Reuters says 40,000 Hamas terrorists are awaiting Israel when the ground invasion starts. And what are your thoughts? 45% said completely level Gaza first. 41% said Israel should proceed as normal, 9% said unsure, and 5% said call off the ground invasion entirely. And on this one, I'm going to have to disagree with the 45%. I don't think that Gaza should be completely leveled, because that would mean killing basically all the civilians that are now trapped by the terrorists, and I don't think the civilians should have to suffer as a result of not being able to leave, because the terrorists are basically keeping them there to get slaughtered. I would say Israel should proceed as normal. The invasion will have to be a little bit bloody. That is the cost of doing things the right way and making sure the civilians don't get killed in mass. Of course, there probably will be some civilian casualties anyway, but at least it won't be as bad as completely leveling the place. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree. I'm almost ending up agreeing with you completely now, Matthew. So let me go through and say the same things you just said, but in a slightly different way. I would have to agree with Matthew. Going in and leveling the strip's a bad idea. It'll end up killing tens of thousands of civilians. Not great. We've moved beyond that. This isn't the 19th century or the 20th century anymore. We're in the modern day. modern nations should not be doing stuff like that. I think that we'll need to see the Israeli Defense Forces just move into the city and start conducting street-to-street fighting, which of course will be pretty tough, pretty bloody, and pretty long and drawn out, but it'll be mitigating civilian casualties. And also, there's 40,000 of them. I think there's about 300,000 IDF soldiers that are going to be moving in. So by numbers, they'll outnumber them. And of course, we've also seen that the Israeli Defense Forces are very well trained at this point. That's quite clear. So we'll probably see that they'll do well, but it'll be a long, drawn out, and pretty bloody affair, at least in between the IDF and Hamas. But for the civilians, hopefully the casualties will be greatly mitigated by that action. And so with that, I hope that does address that pretty well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
You know, one thing that countries don't want to do, and hopefully, you know, Ukraine hasn't done it, and hopefully Israel doesn't do it either, is when you have the chance to potentially, you know, engage in the same activities that the terrorists that are attacking you, like Russia or Hamas, are doing to Ukraine and Israel respectively, you don't want to go lower and, you know, get worse in the war crimes that are being committed to try to counter it, because then you end up losing support on the international front, and it makes it really hard to support countries that do that. So I think Israel will eventually heed the warning from the West and not engage in that. But I completely understand why Israel would want to do it, because obviously they're being attacked wrongfully by these thugs, and Israel's upset. They want to lash out. But Israel is well equipped to fight a ground war, and I think they can end it probably a little quicker than Ukraine could.
Probably so. And I see some people bringing up some interesting comments in the live chat. And that's what's the live chat's most interesting about. So a lot of people bringing up some interesting things to say. Guamsum Cruz said, better the civilians than the Israeli soldiers in my mind. I'd have to disagree, because a soldier is a soldier. And, you know, and a lot of people, like, you know, this is something really tough to say, because I know there's a lot of veterans here, and, you know, and I understand that completely, but a soldier is a soldier. It's their job to be in danger. It's their job to be involved in war, but it's also not their job to put themselves over the lives of civilians. Civilians are always supposed to be protected. And so putting the civilian below the soldier, you are ensuring that there will be needless and massive amounts of civilian deaths. And the modern world is supposed to have moved on from massive civilian deaths over a century ago. So I would have to disagree with that. I understand the mindset there. I entirely do. But at the same time, we have to remember the civilians are there against their own will. And this also moves on to another interesting comment I saw from S House and Trees, who said they had a week so far to leave, but they really haven't, because the video clip that we just showed on stream showed that Hamas is ensuring that these people can't leave. And so while they may have had a week to try and leave, they still can't. They're still stuck there because Hamas isn't allowing them to leave. And so, you know, they're stuck. A lot of them want to leave. We saw that clearly. We saw a massive pileup of people trying to leave the area, and Hamas wasn't allowing them. A lot of them want to go, and a lot of them don't want to be there, and a lot of them don't want anything to do with the IDF. They just want to leave the area, let Hamas get blown away, and that'll be that. But they're being forced to stay there. And we're going to end up saying these people who are innocent civilians, who are not armed, who have really nothing to do with the war for the most part, even if they're sympathetic to it, they're not directly involved in it. We're going to put them under the IDF, who has to go in and deal with Hamas terrorists, and we're going to end up letting a lot of these people get killed. And it just doesn't bode with me well. I mean, I've got to be honest, I see where everyone's coming from. Of course, everyone's pissed off at really the Palestinians in general, not just Hamas, but at Palestine, that this happened, and people want to see vengeance exacted for all of the Israelis that died. But at the same time, we can't have that happen. That means that the Israelis are going to descend to the level of savages, and that's not any way to win. That means you're no better than your enemy. And what are you fighting for at that point? Usually, you're fighting to fight evil. But if you become evil yourself, what is this fight even really about? Is it about your evil triumphing over the other evil, or is it about good actually triumphing over evil and enforcing rules that good people would follow? And that's why I think that we should see that the Israeli Defense Forces still tries to prioritize the safety of citizens, although they're technically not theirs, they're Palestinians. Citizens should be protected, because it's just the way of war, and it's the morally right thing to do, even if these people may be sympathetic to the Hamas cause. As long as they're not raising arms in support of Hamas, I think that they should be owed the same protections and privileges that civilians in any other war are owed, like Ukrainian civilians stuck inside of cities inside of Ukraine during the current war up there, or Russian citizens that are inside of cities that are being attacked by the Ukrainians. When the Ukrainians attack military installations inside of Russia, we cheer that on because it's not killing civilians, it's directly attacking Russian military installations. If the Ukrainians started to outright go out of their way to attack civilians, I wouldn't be cheering that on. I may be pro-Ukrainian, but I'm not for the Ukrainians going and slaughtering innocent civilians either, because it's the wrong thing to do. That's not what people on the right side of history go out and do as a norm. And so, with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And of course, everyone can agree to disagree with me or not, but I always want to know that the Western world stands on its actual moral grounds and doesn't just depart them every single time it's convenient. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and real quick, we have one more poll to address, and this one was just put up, but we're going to go ahead and address it anyway. The question is, which military is better trained and more well-equipped? 75% said the Israeli military, 13% said the Ukrainian military, and 12% said they're equal to each other. And speaking solely in terms of training and how well-equipped they are, I believe the Israeli military definitely is the winner here by a long shot, in my opinion. The Ukrainian military, while not as well-trained and equipped, they do have the fighting spirit that sometimes can't be found even in larger countries, like, for example, in my opinion, China. Even though China is well-equipped and well-trained, they don't have the fighting spirit like Ukraine has because of the unity around their entire culture and their country. Ukraine definitely has that going for it, but when it comes to raw equipment and what they have, Israel is a powerhouse. It always has been, and they're going to be the winner in that poll. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to certainly agree. There's no doubt about it. The Israeli military is better trained and equipped than the Ukrainian military. I have to put that out there by far. The Ukrainians are implementing Western equipment into their armed forces, but most of it's still Soviet vintage. The Israelis use nothing but modern, up-to-date, standard Western equipment. The Tavor is about as modern as you can get of a battle rifle. The Merkava is about as advanced of a main battle tank that you can get. And their entire armed forces is made up of this kind of stuff. Their air force is top-notch. Their air force is the envy of what Ukraine would want if they could have their perfect air force. As far as Israel goes, they are far better equipped than the Ukrainians. By no stretch of the imagination, they are way better equipped. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And also, please don't get offended over a poll like that. I can't stand it when people get upset over something like that. We didn't put the Ukrainians down, but we have to look at facts. If Israel's more better equipped and they're better trained, then we have to recognize that. You know, emotions shouldn't dictate logic here. And you know, some people were taking that the wrong way, and I can't help that. But anyway,
also some people I saw were taking the idea of me saying civilian casualties are unacceptable under any circumstances. And were offended by that as well. I saw some people saying, "Oh, so you're saying they could take over Israel if they had babies strapped to them?" No, that's a totally different situation. What I'm saying is that when there's innocent civilians inside of a major city that's home to about 1 million people, and you start pushing into it and they couldn't leave because they were forced to stay there and they weren't allowed to evacuate, that shouldn't be held against them. And you shouldn't start bombing the buildings with thousands of people in them without really good cause. That's what I'm saying. And a lot of people like to make strawmen out of this stuff. I mean, you know, I've got to be honest. I don't like the idea of people wishing away civilian lives anywhere because, hey, you might not like the Palestinians, you might not like the Russians, but guess what? Those people one day might be your family. It might be your family who's stuck inside of a city here in the United States. Say the United States goes into a civil war for some reason in 10 years' time. Would you want the other side to just mercilessly bombard the city and end up killing your family? I have a feeling you probably wouldn't. So why in the world are we going to say that about other people out there who may not have a choice as to where they are right now? These people are stuck there. They aren't allowed to leave. We just saw proof of that. And so why in the world should we hold that against those people and just bomb them where they are? I mean, these people may not even like Hamas for what we know. I mean, a decent amount of them do, but what if they don't? And we're going to
also, real quick, don't mean to interrupt, but another thing real quick I want to say is that every country has its own specific needs when it comes to defense. Israel has to have a very strong military because they are literally surrounded by threats. They have a ton of enemies, and Ukraine right now has one major enemy, which is Russia. So Ukraine doesn't have to necessarily be as well equipped and well trained as Israel in order to defend itself effectively. as you can see right now, Ukraine operating on its level right now is doing a very good job at defending its country. And even though it isn't on the same level as Israel, that's really not needed in Ukraine. It would be good if they had it, but it's not necessary to defend the country. But Israel has to have that higher level, or they'll get stomped on by all these thugs in the Middle East.
And also another thing, and this is something else as well. If we're saying that the Ukrainians are clearly less equipped, don't you think that that's an important thing to point out so that way we can make sure that support is appropriated to the right directions, like towards Ukraine, more so than Israel? I mean, I don't know why people are taking that as an offense. I mean, honestly, it's a good thing to say that Ukraine is less equipped because it's a great argument to make that they should continue to get more support than Israel will get from the United States. Because we know the United States is going to start giving support to Israel. It's now the question, where is our support going to be going? Because we're putting some kind of a finite cap on how much foreign support we can give. I would still say because of the answer that everyone's giving, which is only 11% of people think the Ukrainian military is better equipped, it clearly shows a lot of us know that the Israelis don't need massive amounts of military support like Ukraine would need. So the poll is more so indicating that we're on the right track of continuing U.S. support to Ukraine. So I don't know why people are taking it offensively. We're not spitting on the Ukrainian military and the nation of Ukraine, but we're pointing out something that's important to remember, especially considering that the U.S. supports both of these countries, and now we have to decide who's getting the most support. Clearly, based off of that poll, it would be Ukraine. Of course, people want to be offended over something. You can be offended. We can't stop you from that. But there's a logic and a method behind the whole thing, and there's a reason to asking the question. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, we are fresh out of poll questions. We ended on a controversial poll, which probably got some people awake again, because I'm sure some folks fall asleep. But anyways, moving on to our Super Chat questions. Up first, we have a very generous donation from Duncan VR. And thank you very much, Duncan, for that support. And this is also going to get people fired up as well, because the animal noises are here. They said, Bamuba, order, order, Bamu, quack. The only war news, baba, with animal noises and comedy Kermit voices, moo, oink, snort. Type Bamuba1 in the chat. Rough. Oh my. 1800, no respect. He's opened a hotline. No respect. Bah, meow, ant noise, Matt, go, bah, woof, quack. And I did. Thank you for the support.
And Geschlechtbeleidigement, and we're going to seize the means of production. And also, let's see here. Oh my. 1-800. Oh man, no respect around here. But still, thank you so much once again for support, Duncan VR, and helping this channel to keep on running. It is folks like you who supported this channel for so long and made it possible for us to do this as a job. And I got to thank you so much once again, Duncan VR, for standing with us here and helping this channel to keep on running. If it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, we're on to the next one. But thank you so much once again for throwing in those traditional animal noises. And so, to the next one.
All right, and our next one is going to go to ALS, who puts in a $23 donation. And ALS, I believe that is your first super chat of the stream. Big shout out to you for that support, and thank you very much for helping to keep us running. It says, though a first, after being with the enforcers since day 5, or actually for 598 days, that means he's a day 1 member. Dang. He says, don't spend too much of your time on me, guys. And one request only, technically, if possible. Can we bring back the English subtitles to the Ukrainian anthem? And thanks.
And thank you so much for the support, ALS, Active Laser System. And thank you so much for helping this channel to keep on running. And also, that is crazy to know that you've been here since day 1. And you said don't spend too much time on me, but we have to, because you've spent too much time watching this show. And I'm blown away that you've been here for 598 days. And I'm completely honored to know that you've been here with us every single step of the way. Also, I got to thank you so much for supporting the channel for the first time ever and helping us to keep this thing rolling. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, this wouldn't have been possible from the start. And of course, I'm saying that, of course, about you being here, hitting the like button, and also supporting us in the super chat. But it's more so just about being here a good amount of the time. The support does help us to keep this thing running, but it means a lot to us that folks hit the like button and just watch our news. We're entirely honored to know that so many people do that every single day, including you, ALS. And I got to thank you so much once again for supporting us and helping us to keep this thing running. There are a lot of people nowadays who have been watching for a very long time who throw in support for the first time ever to keep the channel running. And I've got to thank every single one of y'all who do that. And I also have to say, I thank y'all so much for doing this channel the way it's supposed to be done. It's like viewer support is not supposed to be something that everyone has to chip in on. And a lot of y'all have been watching for such a long time and have never had to watch an ad, never had to sponsor, never even threw in a super chat. And that's the way the channel runs. It's a completely ad-free, sponsor-free deal. You hop in and watch this for free. If you don't like it, you don't have to even spend a single moment watching an ad. And it blows me away that people do find this worthwhile to support, and it allows us to have that model for our streams, for the large part, is to just be able to run this like this. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. And to answer your question, I would love to be able to throw in the English subtitles. Sadly, that was done by a viewer who has disappeared. We don't know where he went. He just kind of, I guess, got tired of the Ukraine war and moved on. But still, I would love to have that. But sadly, the fellow who did that the first time isn't here anymore. But still, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to our next one, we have... Excuse me. We have a $20 super chat from Tom Simmons. And thank you very much, Tom, for that super chat support. Hey! And sorry for sneezing all over your question. He says, you guys in the LSA, awesome. Slava Ukraine. And thank you.
And thank you so much, Tom Simmons, for the support. And you are a part of the Lee Spring Army. And I got to thank you for being awesome and making the Lee Spring Army what it is. Every single viewer brings a unique little piece to the Lee Spring Army that wouldn't be here without y'all, and including you, Tom. And I got to thank every single one of y'all so much for being here and so much for helping this channel to keep on running as well. Y'all support helps us to be possible. And if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't be here. And so with that, long live the LSA, and thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 20 from Enforcer for President, longtime channel viewer, and it's good to see you once again. Thank you very much for the support. They said, Enforcers, we have not plugged the merch lately. Slava Ukraine, God bless Israel, and long live the LSA. Please take a question from that chat.
And long live the LSA, and God bless Israel, and Slava Ukraine. And you were right, we have not plugged that merch in a minute. And let me go and plug my merch for a minute. Enforcerstore.com. And so, here we go. The Enforcer Store. This is the official merch store of the channel. Whenever you buy a piece of merch from here, it goes to support us and help us to keep this thing running. We've got some pretty cool stuff. We actually brought back the He's Watching You little merch run. It was a limited edition merch run. We actually brought it back permanently because we thought it was one of the best designs we ever made. So, you know, we threw it back up. But you can get phone cases, coffee mugs, t-shirts, stainless steel mugs. You can also get hoodies and little stickers. It's pretty cool stuff. And you can also get LSA merch here. Property of the LSA, LSA hoodie, LSA shirt. Pretty basic design, but honestly, I think it's one of the best ones we ever made. Of course, the support does help us to keep the channel running. So if you wanted something cool to show your support for the Lee Spring Army and the channel, you can always go to the merch store and get something here. And I got to thank you so much, Enforcer for President, for throwing in the support and also plugging our merch store for us. We rarely ever plug our merch store because, you know, it seems pretty off to plug a merch store in the middle of covering war footage, so we really rarely ever get to do it. But I thank you so much for giving us the opportunity tonight, Enforcer for President, and also letting us show off some pretty neat designs. Honestly, my favorite one is the He's Watching You one. I'm probably going to get the mug here in a bit. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well, Enforcer for President, and we will make sure to get a live chat. And so with that, what do we got?
All right, and the live chat question goes to Sweet, who says, any idea how far Iran's nuclear program actually is?
We have no idea, from what I understand. Apparently, like, I don't know if the intelligence sphere is trying to keep us in the dark or what, but we don't really get a clear indication of where the Iranians are on a nuclear program. We don't know if they even have one or how far it's gotten. It's completely in the dark, so we have no idea. So I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that, sadly. But I do thank you so much, Enforcer for President, for sponsoring that live chat. And I think the answer around the world is largely nobody has a good idea. And if you hear anyone giving a good idea, from what I understand, most of those good ideas are guesswork and really have no proof behind them. You know, whether they say they don't have a nuclear program or they're about to create a nuclear bomb, from what I understand, all those statements are being based on just nothing. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat goes to Spam Hoffen, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Spam, for that support.
Hey!
And they said, remember me? And yes, I do remember you. They said, my son will turn 1 soon. So happy, by the way. It's euros, not dollar, but no biggie. They literally wrote that into their super chat. I love it. They said, for the Have Fun Fund, and live chat question, please.
And thank you so much for the support, Spam Hoffen. And we remember you. You were around a long time ago. And I got to thank you so much for the support and coming back tonight. And that's crazy to think that we've been on air so long that your son is going to be turning 1 soon. That's actually pretty crazy to think that we've been here doing this for nearly 2 years now. That actually blows me away to think about that. That actually just hit me like a bus. We've been doing this for 2 years nearly. That's actually pretty wild. I mean, like, I can't, like, I've never, like, most of my jobs that I had before this, I probably had for like 3 or 4 months at the most. It's crazy to think that I've been doing this for 2 straight years now. This has pretty much been a career at this point. Well, it's a very small career at this point. And nuts to think that we've been around for so long that you now have a son that's going to be turning 1 soon. And I got to thank you so much. 2 years. Say what?
It's been 2 years.
Yeah, it's been 2 whole years doing this. That's actually crazy. And we've been doing this 6 days a week for 2 straight years. That's actually insane.
Where's the time gone? 2 years?
Where's it gone, man? I don't know. But
that really is like hard to believe it's been 2 years.
Yeah, that's actually crazy. I mean, we've gone through so much in the background of our lives. Like when I started this, I was a sophomore in college, and now I'm a L1 in law school. That's how much time has passed. Yeah, 1L. Well, whatever. I'm gonna call it an L1. Well, 1L, but it's been that long of a time that we've been doing this. It's absolutely crazy to think. That's insane. And it doesn't feel like that either. It honestly feels like we started this maybe like 2 months ago, 2 or 3 months ago, and we've never really felt like we've moved on from that first 2 to 3 months of the show. But that is insane to hear that a baby has been born and is about to turn 1, and we've been running this show for so long that that's just happened. You know, that's just happened in the background, and we're still going. That's insane. Honestly, for some reason, that is the most looking in a mirror kind of super chat that we could have ever gotten, and thinking how long this has been going. But still, thank you so much once again for support and supporting the Have Fun Fund. And while we're not having fun with doing this is more so a thing of planning. But we have been working on getting gun reviews off the ground. I know we've been saying that for a long time now, and it's really because we've never found the time to actually film anything, or really a place to film the stuff. But we still are working on trying to get to gun reviews, and we have some stuff that ought to be rare enough and interesting enough that it actually will be interesting to watch. We'll probably be covering how guns are used in wars, like things like the AK-74, the M4, other kinds of guns throughout history. We'll be trying to flesh out an entire YouTube channel around and probably try and make it unique enough that it actually stands out from the rest. But still, thank you so much for supporting the Have Fun Fund, and we will make sure to take a live chat question after you made me feel like we have now done this for so long. There are kids being born and having their first birthdays, and we've been running the show this whole time. That's actually insane. But still, with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and the live chat question goes to MGP, who says, what's going on with the Kosovo conflict? What's the general status?
From what we understand, the Serbs have largely backed down, the tensions have de-escalated for the time, and nothing's going to be coming out of that, at least for the near future. That's how we understand it. But we haven't really been getting a lot of news out of Serbia to really even know, so that's kind of our running situation right now. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and thank you so much once again for sponsoring that live chat Spam Hoffen and helping the channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Keymaster. And thank you very much, Keymaster, for that support. And they did not put in a comment to address. And I hate that. I hate they didn't put in a comment because I wanted to address something. But Keymaster, thank you very much for that support and helping to keep us running. And it's really good that people are supporting the channel and helping to keep it running, because without y'all, it couldn't. So big thanks to you all. And unfortunately, what say you?
And thank you so much once again for the support. Like Matthew said, it does help the channel to keep on running. And if it wasn't for folks like y'all, we wouldn't be able to be here. And of course, we always want to make sure to thank each and every one of y'all individually for y'all's support. I do know, having actually worked actual jobs, I do know how much time it takes to make a buck. So we are always very appreciative and very thankful for every single bit of support y'all give to this channel. I know how much it takes to make $1, so we always want to make sure to appreciate each and every one of y'all for y'all support, because it takes a lot for y'all to even go out of y'all's way to support the channel. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. We are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Thomas Marsh, who puts in a $20 donation. And I said that twice. Thank you very much, Thomas, for the support. He says, hey guys, keep up the good work and take a question from that live chat.
Thank you so much, Thomas Marsh, for the support. We will keep up the good work thanks to your support, and we will get a live chat as well. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And the live chat question is going to go to Christian Cruz, who says, why aren't we attacking Qatar? And we went after Afghanistan when they harbored bin Laden, and Hamas leadership is in Qatar. And I will say this, Christian, I'm not sure exactly how many of the leadership are in Qatar, but Qatar is cooperating by withholding the $6 billion from Iran, so they can't be that overwhelmed by the terrorists in their leadership, or otherwise they wouldn't have done that. But you probably do have a valid point. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say the same thing, to be quite honest. A lot of people always want us to go and kick in people's teeth, but these people are doing a little bit of help for us, so we can't just go in and kick their teeth in, because that would make them feel like they shouldn't even be helping us at all, and they should just unfreeze that $6 billion and throw it at the Iranians. So we always have to make sure to keep those things in mind. But good question. Why in the world are Hamas leaders there? And maybe that's a question we'll get an answer to in the future. But then again, Middle Eastern politics, or more so Middle Eastern diplomacy, is not as easy as it seems, or as black and white as it seems. It's very nuanced, and that's why we see terrorist leaders just hopping around all over the place, even in countries that we're somewhat friendly with, and then nothing happens to them. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you once again, Thomas Marsh, for sponsoring that live chat. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a 10 from Nick, who says, have some caffeine on me. And thank you very much for that support, and we do love caffeine. That's the only way we can get enough energy to do these streams at night. Caffeine is life, and we have a lot of it. And thank you very much for supporting the Caffeine Fund. And Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you so much, Nick, for supporting our caffeine addiction. And Matthew's right. Without coffee, we wouldn't be here tonight. We actually had some friends over before the stream. It was very nice seeing them. We hadn't seen them in months. And it was only for an hour or so. But they were only supposed to be over for 30 minutes, and then it was an hour or an hour and a half or so. It was really fun hanging out with them. And they were so nice. They actually gave us these hoodies. We're both wearing these hoodies. They're called Roots, I think. They're from
Roots.
They're from Canada, and they brought them all the way down here. We were completely blown away. We're actually wearing both of them right now, and they are so nice. It was great having them back. We've been looking forward to having them back for months, and so if it wasn't for us having caffeine, honestly, it was tiring, because I got really excited and hyped up and really spent all my energy hanging out with them. If I hadn't had coffee tonight, I probably wouldn't be on air at all. But still, thank you so much once again for support, Nick and Avdiivka, because you're helping us to keep this thing running, literally. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next super chat goes to Brian Rowland, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Brian, for that support. He says, normally I'm at work when you guys come on, so I don't get to interact much. I broke my finger at work, so I'm home right now. And also, I'm sorry to hear that. He said, keep up with great coverage, young men.
And thank you so much for the support. I hate to hear that you broke your finger, though. That sounds terrible, and I hope it heals soon. And I hope for that reason you get back to work, so that way you're not here watching the show. It's I love hearing that people are watching the show, but hearing you broke your finger and that's why you're able to watch the show live, I'm like, eek. Well, that doesn't sound that great. But hey, I mean, workers' comp is a thing, and that's probably great. So I hope that it heals, and I hope you did get workers' comp for that and everything. And also, it's great to have you on tonight too, Brian, because you have been on several times in the past before, and I remember that. But I hope that everything is going okay with that situation, because that's tough to hear. But still, thank you so much for being here tonight, and thank you for encouraging us to keep up the work, because your support is helping us to make that possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again. I hope your finger does heal up right as rain.
Right as rain. And seriously, though, hope your finger does get better. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Santiago Flores. And thank you very much, Santiago, as well, for that support. He says, the battle for Gaza will be like the Battle of Manila in 1945. About 100K civilians were killed because the Japanese refused to leave the city.
Yeah, it's going to be like that. I have to agree, Santiago. It's going to be a terrible place. It's going to be a terrible place filled with hellish things happening. and it's largely out of Israel's control at this point. And a lot of people are going to say they shouldn't push in, but they have to. It's something they must do. And then Hamas forced the civilians to stay there. So now it's going to be a damn mess. It's just going to be horrendous. But it is going to be like the Battle of Manila, 100%. I would agree with you completely on that, Santiago. Let's just hope it's not as bad. Maybe it'll be half as bad. Anything would be better than the Battle of Manila. That was a terrible battle. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 20 from Marion Deemer. And thank you very much, Marion, as well, for that support. They said war. Well, you guys, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing.
Say it again now. But still, thank you so much for the support, Marion. And I got to agree. What is it good for? It's good for absolutely nothing. I would agree. And especially seeing it for nearly, well, it's something like, what is it, 18 months? Someone actually got the count on how many months we've been on air. It hasn't been 2 whole years, but it feels like it. It's been 2 years of the channel, but not 2 years of war. But seeing it for 2 years, I got to tell you, war is the worst thing ever. And if it was, like, honestly, at the beginning of this, I wanted to move from running a gaming channel and back into what I was originally trying to do on the platform, which was current events, news reporting, things like that. This war has worn me down mentally so badly, especially in Ukraine and now what we're seeing coming out of Israel, that honestly, I kind of be happy going back to gaming. Sometimes I think about that because I'm like, man, the world is horrendous. It's a tough place out there, and it's terrible to see. It'd probably be better just to have some fun and play games, but that's not what we do. We cover the news. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. And I'd have to agree with you, Santiago. War is good for nothing, like the song said. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $15 super chat from AMX10 Speedy Bang Bang. And thank you very much for that support. And also, it's good to see you once again. And they said those 120 Iron Ukrainian flag signs on main roads around the lower South Island, New Zealand, have just received a 3rd coating of fresh paint. It's great to see.
Hey, that's really cool to hear. And also, where in the world was that in New Zealand again, Matthew?
It was a lower South Island.
Lower South Island. Well, here's the lower South Island. Well, I was like, let's see, where do we go in here? Well, it's nice to hear they did get their next coating of paint, and hopefully it is looking good. But I don't know where to go from here, rather than just looking at the southern island. But still, thank you so much once again for support and sharing that with us. And it's good to hear that New Zealand is getting the proper care. Also, one thing, Matthew, before we move on, this is actually really cool. Look at this. This is a national park, Egmont National Park. Look at how most of it is a perfect circle.
That is pretty neat.
That is pretty neat. It's got a long story behind why it's a perfect circle, but it's still really cool to look at that it has a perfect circle right there. But with that, thank you once again for support. I hope y'all enjoyed that fun little fact about one of New Zealand's national parks. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Eric Ellingwood, who puts in a 10. It says, this is my 3rd super chat ever and first time commenting here, so hello. And I want to send books to Ukraine to support Ukrainian farmers, and how would I go about that?
And I thank you so much for the support, Eric Ellenwood. And also, thank you for your 3rd super chat. To answer your question, I honestly wouldn't know how to send a book over to Ukraine. Sadly, we don't really do a lot of infrastructure. We don't have a lot of infrastructure to send stuff over to Ukraine. The DHL losing the drones kind of proof of that. But I'm sure that there are folks out there on Twitter who do it as a job, pretty much, their specialty, to get stuff from the rest of the world into Ukraine. I would highly recommend trying to reach out to one of those people, specifically one that's a little bit on the smaller side, because if you reach out to one that has hundreds of thousands of subs, they're probably being overwhelmed with a lot of recommendations to do something like that. But if you reach out to one of the smaller ones, they possibly would be able to get your books on into Ukraine to support the farmers. I think that's honestly an amicable goal. I haven't heard of anyone trying to do that before, and I wish you the best of luck in your pursuit. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. Hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and we're going to speed up just a tad because we're starting to run late and we have many left. But the next one goes to Rider Life 76, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much for that support. They said, long-time watcher and first time sending chat. Slava Ukraine and Puerto Rico. You guys do a great job and have some pizza money.
And thank you so much for the support for the pizza money. And thank you for enjoying this channel and supporting us and helping us to keep this thing running. Because folks like you make it possible. And so with that, we're on to the next one. But thank you once again.
And the next one goes to Skilled Painter, who puts in a 10. And the Skilled Painter does not leave a comment. But I do trust that you are a skilled painter, and thank you very much for supporting the channel, and we do appreciate it very much. And with that being said, we have a $10 super chat from Seth LSA, who says, join day 140 of the war. I am your local Alabamian from Rocket City. And please take a live chat comment from the LSA. And let's go, Huntsville.
And let's go. Huntsville's the biggest city in Alabama now. Congrats on getting that title. And also, thank you so much for being an Alabamian watching this stream and helping us to keep this thing running. And we will make sure to get a live chat. But before we do that, Tom Exman actually asked a question that I would like to answer. He said, well, did you get insurance with DHL? Oh, actually, I hope DHL gave you a warranty on that loss. No. I actually opted out of getting package insurance for that thing because I think the package insurance was like an additional $250 on top of the $500 shipping. And at that point, it had gotten so expensive with a $2,000 drone, $500 shipping, that an extra $250 for insurance, I was like, no, I can't do that because it was incredibly expensive. It was unbelievably expensive. The shipping already was. So throwing in like an additional $250 for insurance, I was like, I just can't do that. Like, you know, I pray that it made it over there. It did. And then on the way back, after, for some reason, it didn't get picked up where it was supposed to be by the third party guy. It got brought back by DHL and then it got lost somewhere out here in the southeast because it was in Georgia and then it said it was on the way to Birmingham and then it never made it here. So I don't know what happened at that leg. And then after that, it was just kind of a loss. But with that, hope that does address that further well. Let's get a live chat.
And the live chat goes to Sax2, who says, I saw some Israeli tanks on TV, and they had some short chains hanging under the rear of the turret. Any ideas?
From what I understand, the short chains are kind of a high explosive anti-tank round protection. If an RPG hits those chains, it'll detonate on the chain instead of on the actual surface of the turret, which makes sure to dissipate its explosive force. You know, when it's actually hitting the rear part of the turret. That's what I understand, therefore, but I may be wrong. And so with that, I hope that does answer that live chat well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Margaret Hemsley, who put in a $7 donation. And thank you very much for that support. And she says, here's my fine for making people think you give out fines if we don't behave. And please choose a smart question, because I have that brain fog.
And thank you so much for the support, Margaret. It's okay to have brain fog. I actually have that a lot nowadays, especially at law school, believe me. And also, thank you so much for sending in another fine. You don't have to send in fines, Margaret. You don't have to send in your fines. Your stick's not even on the ground, man. But still, with that, we will get a live chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and the live chat question goes to Justa Bill, who says, how does Iran attack Israel? And Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Jordan, just let them fight it out on their own territory and airspace? Question mark.
They probably will. Iraq and Syria, well, Syria is completely passive. They don't even have an air force or really any good air defenses anymore. But Iraq largely just throws in diplomatic protests nowadays and tries to stay uninvolved. And the best way that Iran could attack Israel most likely would be through the air alone. I can't really see a way that the Iranian army would be able to reach Israel or Israel to reach Iran. So it will most likely become an air war. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Margaret, and sponsoring that live chat. And I hope we answered that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Blue Flam 777 LSA, longtime channel viewer as well. Hey! And thank you very much, Blue Flam, for that support. He says LSA for the Ass Clown Fund.
Well, thank you so much for the support, Blue Flam 777, and helping the channel to keep on running. And thank you for supporting the Ass Clown Fund. Oh man. Hopefully we don't have to worry about any of that stuff anymore. Hopefully that's water under the bridge. But you never know. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you once again, Blue Flam, for helping this channel to keep on running and making me bust out laughing because I didn't expect a super chat to say that. But with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right, and the next one goes to CK Bold, who puts in a 5 and says BAT 12-2.
Squawk. Thank you so much once again for support. And BAT 12-2. Thank you once again for support, CK Bold. I don't know what to make of that. But still, thank you so much once again. And thank you for helping the channel to keep running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Reader Stuff, who puts in a 5 and says, reached the live stream for the first time, low-key hopeful that the swampy season is impending the orcish logistics as much as it does maneuvering.
And thank you so much for the support, Reader Stuff. And also, thank you for making a pilgrimage to the live stream and also supporting it to keep it running. Hopefully, I don't think we even need to hope. I think it already is starting to impact the Russian offensive near Avdiivka, because we can already see it's impacting the Ukrainian offensives further south in Zaporizhia. So I think it's going to affect everyone pretty poorly, and it's going to stop all offensives dead in their tracks like we're seeing right now. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support, Reader Stuff. I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Alex Burleton, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Alex, for that support. He says, keep up the good work and take one from the live chat. And we will take one from the live chat, and we do appreciate that support. And the live chat question goes to Barry Woodward, who says, is there any other information on what Iran means to intervene if Israel continues into Gaza?
Most likely some kind of an air war campaign, from what I'm understanding. I can't really see the Iranians sailing all the way around the Middle East and through the Suez Canal to make it to Israel, or sailing up into this little Gulf of Aqaba to go. Like, there's no way. I can't see them doing any kind of a ground war, and also they don't have a navy to do anything like that with. So it would most likely be some kind of an air war fought over the Middle East by both Israel and Iran. That's most likely what I'm seeing, though. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Reader Stuff once again, who puts in another 5. It says, not too worried about Israel, and they are working from a position of superior firepower and have a believable nuclear armament.
Oh, and they do. There's no doubt about that. I don't think they'd use the nukes anywhere inside of Palestine, however. But still, they do have a pretty good nuclear arsenal, very good military. Not really worried about them too much. It's just worrying about the implications to civilians in the area. That's really what it's all about at this point. But beyond that, I feel like Israel has the situation well under control. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Anthony, who puts in a 5 and says, Enforcer, do you think the Yemen civil war will ever end? Next year will be the 10-year mark of the conflict.
Probably not. No civil war in the modern day really ever comes to a conclusion or an end, because there's so many powers at play supporting and running most sides well beyond their prime. And so it probably won't end, at least in my opinion. And it's kind of a periphery war. Not a lot of people think or talk about it much, and that also will ensure that it keeps on going on. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Something Original, who puts in a 5 and says, a la snack bar.
Thank you for the support and throwing that in. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Something Original as well, who puts in a 5 and says, Enforcer, why are the live feeds posting Israel when it's a regular Chicago Saturday night video feed?
Oh, dang, man. Oh, my Lord. That's brutal. That's brutal. Well...
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Damn, son, where'd you find this? I would say you got a good point. But hey, it could be worse. It could be Detroit. And so with that, thank you so much once again for Detroit. Someone is about to get offended that I just said that. How dare he? It's a joke. Calm down. But with that, we're on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Vance Hicks, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Vance, for that support. And we do appreciate it very much. We also have a 5 from Be Ya Best, who says Ukrainian is easier to understand than English.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I still haven't really gotten the thing down with Ukrainian. I do have it on English a little bit. English speak much, yes. And so hopefully I can maybe get down Ukrainian in the future. But still, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one. But man, the everyone in live chat's doing the meme. Take him to Detroit. No!
What meme is that?
Oh, dude, hang on. I think we can actually show that, because it's a meme. It's like once something becomes popular enough, like a meme, I think it falls into fair use. So take him to Detroit.
I heard that I think there was somebody out there trying to rename Chicago because it's like Iraq, basically, to Chirac.
Really?
That's what I heard. Some people are calling it Chirac.
Man,
what the hell is this dude's haircut like?
Dude, well, you're about to find out the meme.
Take him to Detroit.
No!
Oh, damn.
Detroit! No!
Oh man, that's the meme about Detroit. That's literally the whole meme. So if people were referencing that in the live chat, man, they're like, take him to Detroit. Oh man. But anyways, now y'all saw the meme, y'all got context, and Matthew's got context too. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a 2 from Eric Kress, who says, how can they tell who the Hamas is inside of Gaza?
Well, usually they actually wear like white headbands, armbands, stuff like that. But they try and actually bling themselves up a little bit to look like a paramilitary force. So you can usually tell them for that reason. But I don't know. Maybe they'll drop that once the IDF enters Gaza, and then it'll be really hard to tell them apart from normal civilians, which will of course make the situation far worse. And that'll also be a violation of the rules of war, considering that the Hamas terrorists want to consider themselves militants. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and we have a 2 from Ari Soini, who does not leave a comment. But thank you very much, Ari, as always, for that nice, generous support. And we do appreciate it very much. And with that being said, we're moving into our live chat questions. And up first, we have the Morse code decoders of the stream. Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Paul Schultz, Tylon LSO, Kevin J., and Rumpelstiltskin. They said, LSA brothers and sisters, tonight's Morse code cipher is, Ukraine is bringing us smackdown. I said a smackdown like no other on the Russians. Long live the LSA.
That's the sound of money. Y'all got that dead on the nail. Y'all hit the jackpot. Y'all got the Morse code message correct. Ukraine is bringing a smackdown like no other on those Russians. I haven't seen a smackdown like this since some New Yorker got pissed off at some guy on a subway. I'm telling you. Oh, man, I'm telling you. But still, thank you for getting that Morse code message correct on the 598th day of the war. Can you believe that the Sunday fundraiser is going to be running on the 599th day of the war, a day before day 600? That's insane. But still, with that, we are on to the live chats. We're going to answer 5 live chats because I want to try and get to more than just 3 because 3 is the bare minimum. We're going to answer 5 live chats and then round out tonight's stream. And so with that, we're on to the first one.
And we actually don't have 5 live chats. We have 4. So the first one goes to Vorian174. He says, do you think Iran would resort to nukes?
Yeah, well, if they have them, maybe, but I'm having a feeling they probably won't even if they did have the nukes, because that would be a pretty big escalation. I feel like that would probably involve international intervention in Iran if they used a nuke, probably because they only have one. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to John B. Rempel, who says, did you hear the approximate 1,000 arms containers from North Korea ended up near the Ukraine border?
I did hear about that, and we've been making a big stink about that diplomatically here in the United States, about the North Koreans supporting the Russians, and I think it's a good hill to fight on about North Korean support. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, because I did hear about it, and it's a little concerning, but hopefully not too concerning. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Yvette Hernandez, who says, I just heard that they are going to delay the ground attack due to weather, as Iran came out saying that they will get involved if Israel attacks Gaza. And do you think this is a coincidence, at Enforcer Matt? I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't think there are many coincidences in life. I think there's probably a reason behind it, and probably not just happenstance. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that it is maybe related, maybe not. Weather is a huge deal when conducting an offensive. You don't really just want to go into one with the weather being against you. You usually want the weather to be in your favor. So that may be a legitimate reason why the Israelis are kind of standing by with the ground offensive, but at the same time, we know for certain the Israelis aren't really that scared of the Iranians. They've shown that time and time again in the past. So I have a feeling that while it's coincidental, it probably isn't the exact reason why the Israelis haven't conducted the offensive yet. But it may be because, it's very coincidental timing that both of those things happened. So, not to cop out, but, just giving both sides of the argument and showing that they both have equal validity to them. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Guamson Cruz, who says, I pose a question. Would you have a short, brutal war, which leaves potentially thousands dead, or a long, lawful war, where one side obeys the rules of war, but guarantees thousands die?
Well, if thousands die in both situations, I would rather have a long, drawn-out war, because hopefully the people who die, the thousands who die in a long, drawn-out war where someone follows the rules of war, hopefully those are people who are actually supposed to die. Because going off of that argument, we could justify the Russians killing all of those people in Mariupol because they were trying to conduct a fast war and get it done quick. So all of those 100,000 Ukrainians completely justified because the Russians were just trying to get the thing over with quick and actually cut down the suffering overall. But that's not how we see it, because it's still deaths of innocent civilians that weren't supposed to happen. And that's how I would still see the war inside of Israel if they were to conduct a swift war where they kill tens of thousands of innocent civilians. I would consider that to be about the same thing as the Battle of Mariupol. That's the deaths of innocent civilians for no reason other than it happened. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion, about that moral dilemma. And with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I thank every single one of y'all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute honor to know that we've been able to run the news for all of y'all again. Tonight, at the peak, there were 5.9 thousand of y'all here, and 26,000 of y'all who have watched the stream from beginning to end. And we've been entirely honored to know that we've been able to run the news for y'all tonight once more. Of course, join us tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time for the Sunday fundraiser. We will be picking a fundraiser operating out of Ukraine, so that way we can make sure that the support gets to Ukrainians, so that way they can make sure to help themselves out. Of course, if you have enjoyed, make sure to subscribe as well. We run these streams every single day of the week, except for Monday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine and in Israel as well. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and God bless Israel.
And good night, folks. Thanks for another great stream. We'll see you all tomorrow for the fundraiser. And LSA, we the best. Another one.
DJ Collins!
The Lee Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю